we will take a look at and approve the agenda. We do have one addition to the agenda, and that is to consider the NACO dues renewal. We are overdue and we need to take care of that bit of business. And we will do that probably just after 3.5, the sponsorship request that we're considering. So at this point, we can dive right in. Our first item of business is 3.1 Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Assessment Process Overview. Sean McGuire and our guests.
So I was just going to start off, Chair, just to give a little background to folks who are listening. As many of you know, we've had, the Board of Commissioners has had 2 EDI coordinators in the past, and our EDI coordinator did transfer over to the Health Department that has a little bit more of a very clear focus team that are working very hard in public health. And so I wanted to take a pause with the support of the board to do an assessment on EDI and what it means to the county, how we can incorporate it into our daily practices. And also really looking at, as we discussed in previous meetings, to make this individual successful, we want to make sure the scope of work is clearly looked at. So I had asked Sean McGuire to begin to work with us, and I will tell you a little bit of the process of how we chose this consultant. I'll give this to Sean to kind of look at, and then we will be able to talk to our consultants, UPD Consulting. I know they are on the ground running. They've done some interviews already between myself and Commissioner Wise, and I know they are going to be talking to a lot of people within the county, and I would like to take it over to Sean.
Thank you. Yes, a couple months ago, Rachel reached out and so asked me to investigate and explore different options. I first went out to my first conversations I wanted to have were with other jurisdictions that were similar. So, well, not in size. So I talked to King County and the City of Portland's equity offices to kind of see how they were. Obviously, Seattle and Portland are just slightly more populated than Benton County, but it did give some insight on the fact that, they have 20 and 14 staff compared to, I would say, 1 here, or but we do have other staff in the health department, as Rachel said. So then reached out to a handful of consultants. Some just didn't have the expertise on this. Reached out to UPD and had a conversation with Sherry Chen, who's on here, and we just sounded like that's exactly what we needed, that kind of an evaluation. So that was the process that took over the past couple of months.
We also used an RFP process.
Yes, exactly. And so wanted to get them on, and then so we agreed to a contract, and then I'll hand it over to Philip and Sherry for a brief introduction.
Sherry, did you want to say anything before I walk them through the timeline? Just about UPD, maybe some background?
Sure. Yeah, I can tell you a little bit about UPD. We are a Black-owned management consulting company, and our focus is on equity, change management, and implementation. We've been in business for about 17 years, and our focus primarily has been in the public sector. We provide a broad continuum of services, including assessments, planning, but our heart is in sort of getting organizations to start the work. So we really enjoy the implementation piece, setting up sort of performance management, continuous improvements processes, because we actually think that that's what really sort of moves both the work and the learning process, as opposed to sort of super long engaged planning processes. I would say that, and Sean knows this, we have a fairly practical, very implementation focused philosophy that comes with equity work. And that is based on, really our direct experience, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years. And so we hope that this opportunity in working with you all, despite, I know that you have some long-term vision for what you want to be doing with equity assessments, but we hope that the work with us helps you have some focus, both in thinking about the coordinator position, the roles across the county, the organization, and the leaders there. So we're really looking forward to diving in. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry. If I could just direct you all's attention to the project timeline that should be on your screen right now. I just want to walk you through our timeline. So this week we've focused on doing our kickoff, and essentially that's kind of come in different pieces and having conversations with Sean and even what we're doing today. And as Rachel mentioned, we've had a couple interviews so far, and looking forward to getting some more of those scheduled to kind of give us a well-rounded understanding of, you know, some of the challenges, the barriers and opportunities that Benton County faces, both in the EDI coordinator role and fulfilling that, but also just what are the priorities for the organization concerning EDI. And then into next week, we'll be looking into prioritizing based off of what we get from these interviews and our understanding of the organization, to put together essentially like a list of things that we think the county would be well served in focusing on, and providing those insights and guidance around how do you actually operationalize EDI in the county to a larger degree. And then we'll also be looking to have a working session with some key members of the leadership team. Then getting into our third week, we'll then look into analyzing the EDI role. And so really doing a deeper look at what are the challenges and barriers to the success in this role, and really making sure that the person in this role is set up for success, and that you all feel good about the progress that they're able to make, and mapping out what that work plan will look like for them. And then lastly, leadership alignment. So we always know that EDI or any type of initiative in the organization, its success depends on the buy-in of the leadership. So we want to make sure that you all are well informed and have given your feedback, and that you've been consulted with about what's important in terms of the EDI moving forward. And then we'll be looking to conduct a RACI, which is just a project management term for how do you assign certain people to do certain things, or what role do they play in terms of the work that needs to be carried out. So RACI stands for responsible, A is accountable, C is consulting, I is informed. So we'd look to have that type of work session to kind of really put some pieces on paper in terms of what you all could look to do should you choose to follow those recommendations. And then lastly, we'll provide some guidance on what it would look like to revamp the EDI coordinator role. So I'll stop there. I'll kick it back over to Sean, unless there's some maybe brief questions or anything of that nature.
Commissioner, do you have any questions? Okay. The only thing I would follow up on is, as they had mentioned, Sarah Siddiqui had queued up GARE, Government Alliance for Race and Equity, to do an organization-wide assessment. And so that is currently in the queue, but we want to make sure that this coordinator goes through the process and is in a good place for success, and then move that forward. So just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you. I'm happy to have this process begin, and the fact that it's on a fast track so that we can figure out where we want to go with the EDI coordinator role and how we want to recalibrate it.
Mhm.
I was wondering about that connection with GARE, because I know that we've planned to do this organizational assessment. It's been in the work load of the coordinator for the last 2.5 years. So now it's finally happening, but and I'd love to know more about that assessment and where that will take us. But I'm assuming that I can learn about that during this 4-week process as we move forward, and that this process may help inform what we do.
I think Sherry, in our initial conversation, the perfect word was scaffolding. And we're taking each step and to reassess where we are now and just have a strong foundation so we can go to the next foundation, So yeah, I really appreciated that conversation with her early on. I think that's a good framework or peace of mind of how this is going to move forward.
Yep. Well, I look forward to my interview. I know it's scheduled for later this week, and I'm sure I can get more questions answered at that time, but I'm happy to have this work beginning.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah,
I guess either for Sherry or Phil, or maybe for Sean, on the map you were talking about, reviewing the EDI coordinator role, and as I'm sure, as you know, with this working, not one size fits all. I'm curious about, as you do your analysis, are you looking at from a best practices standpoint in terms of, okay, is that the right model? Is there a different type of model that the county would consider based on its size and its needs? So just kind of curious about how you approach that.
Absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
we'll definitely be looking at best practices for the role. Go ahead, Sherry.
I mean, I think some of it is, really, unpacking a little bit what the county's priorities are. And, what, this sort of goes beyond the coordinator. I mean, Phil and I have been around the last few years working with various chief diversity officers, coordinators, specialists, in different organizations. Also, obviously, we watch the news, we're seeing some of the national conversation that's happening around DEI. So I think, the challenges are, there's some unique context, but they're very common, right? And why we are seeing, I don't know, like something like 60% turnover of those positions in the last 2 years. So yes, as Phil said, we will be looking at best practices, but I think the answer is in, the sort of where's the shared ownership of this work across your organization's leaders, so that the coordinator position, whatever precisely percentage of this time and that time, that person can be successful because it is not just, everything EDI belongs to that single person. I mean, that will never work.
And if I can follow up on that, that's exactly what we heard from King County and from Portland. That's what I'm saying. They have 14 to 20, they have very specific positions, and it's not just one after other. So that's why that first conversation with Sherry and Philip was so impactful and profound to see this is how we need to structure moving forward.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Okay. Appreciate the timeline, and do we have those slides with us here?
Yes. I
Okay.
have we can
Okay.
distribute them. I know.
It would be great to have that timeline, just so we can refer to it as we move forward. Appreciate it. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank
Looking
you.
forward to working with you.
Likewise. We'll move on now to impact projections of county growth and future needs. Sean again. with
Okay.
Sydney and Michael.
Well, thank you. I want to begin. I know you see these rock stars every once in a while for an hour or so, but I don't know if you've ever actually introduced themselves. So want to give them a minute or two to introduce themselves to you all, so we all know who they are. So Sydney.
Hi, I'm Sydney. I've been working with Sean and Michael for the last 2 years on the sustainability team. And I'm technically the climate action intern. So I am at OSU, I'm studying environmental economics and policy. And I've gotten to build up this really robust greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And more recently, looking at scope 3 emissions. So that's me.
And you're already done with your economics degree and just picked up a Spanish minors because, what else? What else are you doing on a Saturday? Michael?
My name is Michael Gardner-Brown. I started with Benton County in November 2019 and started working on the greenhouse gas inventory. The last couple of years, I passed it off to Sydney to do a lot of that day-to-day work, but I still am here kind of in an advisory capacity and sort of helping develop the scope 3 element of the inventory. My day job, though, is I work for an ESG advisory firm. I'm on the climate side of that business. And so that's sort of our quantitative arm where we do a lot of greenhouse gas inventories, but also some climate scenario analysis. I'd say kind of the bulk of our work right now is helping publicly traded companies sort of deal with SEC regulations that have recently passed and the California bills as well. We also work with privately held companies as well.
We'll start there.
With what?
Yeah.
Oh, with publicly traded and privately held companies. Yeah.
I will kind of dive into the specifics. So So I wanted to kind of begin first setting expectations about the presentation. One, this is not the annual presentation Jen and I give with the inventory and the climate action plan.
You wouldn't mind speaking up.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. You got it. So what I wanted to share was to kind of begin with the just excruciatingly painfully obvious statement that we are in government. And so we don't really get the opportunity or the luxury of just having one thing that we're in charge of other than the general betterment of our constituencies. And that can even go down into, the basic definition of sustainability, equity, environment, economy, and a new microphone, and livability. Good. Okay. So sometimes when we're going through this, those principles or objectives may not always be in alignment. And in fact, sometimes they can be in conflict. And so as we went through this the past year, we'll get into why, it's been really interesting as we build this new inventory and the scenario builder that we're starting to see some of these conflicts as we are expanding in unprecedented growth in the next 5 years. Those conversations I'm having with Rick and Paul behind me, Paul Wassinger, so I really appreciate that. Okay, as long as the sound is good. And so we wanted to come to you today, no decisions to be made. We're not talking about this, but just to kind of share with you the conversations that we're having as we project where we're going and the impact. Specifically, today we're talking about greenhouse gas, but we want that to be a proxy, more of a lens to look through and to start identifying some of these processes that we're going to need to address if we're going to be moving in a more effective, efficient manner. So just want to set expectations on that moving forward. So I know you want to. Yeah. Uh-huh. Can we do next?
Just kind of in this way, if it doesn't, not working. Is down in your.
Nope.
Oh.
I'll push that to you.
Okay.
Yeah, if you could put the mic a little closer, that would help. Thank you.
While we're waiting on that, I'll just say thank you for calling out the obvious, which is that we're in government. And I think it's those of us who do it every day sort of can forget that community members who have certain, some of the work we do is more important than other work to them. And I think sometimes it's hard for them to realize you can't just focus 100% of county efforts on one thing. We have to spread it across the entire county. So.
Yeah, and while we're getting ready for this, I think one of the things is, and I want to be crystal clear, yes, we're going to be talking about adding tonnage to the new facilities. It's 130,000 square feet that we'll be building soon. You're not going to hear me or anyone say, no, don't build a jail, don't build an EOC. Brian can do it from his cube. Brian. No, I mean, these are the, we serve the public. We also live on a planet. And so how do we walk through them? So should I just, good. Can you just go? That's right, just sit. Everything. Space bar will be fine. Okay, so why are we here today? We're here today mainly because Sydney got to stay here for another year. And what that does is it cuts our time about 2-3 months. We don't need to hire someone. And I will say this internship, and we really appreciate your support in funding this. This is highly competitive. I usually get 25 to 30, usually a PhD. These are the cream of the crop. And so having that, not going through that process, making sure someone's already comfortable, that's how we were able to build that scenario builder and the calculator. So now we can use 2022 numbers and just give us the square feet. This is why I'm talking to Paul and Rick a lot. Give me the square feet, give me the projected electricity, and we can start to identify what the future might be holding. Then we are going to have increased emission sources, both in volume and utilities, but also you've heard me say the last year that we're going to be addressing purchasing / supply chain. That's the scope 3 that Sydney and Michael have been talking about. And then the last one is we are on the cusp of the first major construction projects in decades. I'll show you the slide, but other than the second floor of Avery, that's it. And the massive renovation at Health Services, that's it. So we're going to be really expanding growth. So. So I want to, this is our goal. We usually blow past this, like, oh, it's half of 2010 by 2030. The real clause on this one is reduce its greenhouse gas emissions. What does its mean? And to date, we have had a somewhat narrow definition of what we're tracking. We just have not had the capacity to be looking at these scope 3 that is on the inventory of everyone else. That's why it's been great to have this team to start saying, this is coming, plus the increase in construction. So these are really big steps. I also want to share with you what our equation is. We always start with usage because first R and the triple R's, reduce, right? And so when Paul is back here putting in LEDs and watching our electricity go down and natural gas go down, we need to start reducing that use first. Then we look at generation. Right now it's all solar, but that doesn't mean we can't have wind in the future or something. Offsets, that comes from two places. Right now, it's all attached to electricity, specifically Pacific Power, like Blue Sky and with Oregon Shine, which is now Arcadia, the community solar program, which is actually cheaper, but we buy into, we will assign buildings to subscribe to future solar projects. So that's kind of cool. That's those offsets, and then sequestration. Last year, you all approved, there are about 72, 73 acres in Bazell that Jesse Ott signed off on and said we will not log at all. And so with that official statement, we can actually use that to reduce our sequestration. So that gets us to our net. So I just want to kind of walk through what the actual equation is. So a lot has happened since 2010. I'm sorry, I need to take a side note. I just looked at 2010 and saw Obama. I'm like, gosh, that just feels like 30 years ago. And iPad came out in January of 2010. Who knew? Anyway, number of FTE has increased significantly. And I put not just 2010, but 2014, there was a dip in our budget. And so our FTE numbers, I use the FTE from the budget. So that's how I can track back to 2010. That's 230 more people in the past decade. That's not insignificant. We purchased Sunset, Calapooie here, and then last month or whatever, 4185 across the street. We, as I mentioned, built the second floor of Avery and the remodel, and the crisis center is currently being constructed. And then on the horizon is the courthouse, EOC, and jail. This is not small. And this is all based on that baseline of 2010. So it's not like we can take it off. As we grow, we're still hooked on to 2010. So I just wanted to kind of share this with you and to kind of give you the mindset of when Paul and I and Sydney and Michael are kind of talking about what the breadth of what we're adding. So when you adjust all of what we're doing now and what we're projecting in the future, that changes our baseline of 2010. So this is what we're looking at. If I'm not here in 2030, good luck with this. You're only 4,500 tons down. But what I wanted to do, and for the first time that we presented, and Commissioner Weiss, I referenced Scott Dibvad, who does the state of Corvallis's inventory. We meet every month, and we rarely do this, but Maura, if you can click, we really don't talk about scopes that much. Go ahead. Oh. There we go. This is our first introduction to what scopes are. And we usually don't have to, but this is that's new, or I guess the next generation of how we're tracking it. And I'm going to get into 1 and 2. I'm going to start explaining to what those are. But again, this is not small. So let's get into, because again, usually we'll just say electricity, natural gas, what the specifics are. So if you can, next slide, please. This is the loveliness of scopes. This is from the EPA. And what they do is they break it into 3 categories. And I'm going to lean in on Sydney and Michael if I completely botch this. Scope 1 is what do you burn right here, what you own. So that is primarily natural gas and fleet. Go into your car, you turn it on, it is within our domain. Scope 2 is what we use, what we purchase outside. the big elephant of that is electricity. So 1 and 2 are kind of what you're using and generating either on-site or what Benton County owns. Scope 3 is the remainder in the long division. That's how we get to work, our carbon-based life forms, how we get here. So that's commuting, what we purchased, travel, which we have included. What else we got? Waste, we've been from the beginning. And then outsourced. Michael, I don't know if you want to sort of going down a little bit of what else is other organizations are using that.
Yeah, I think another good way to think about scope 3 is just sort of what's in your value chain upstream and downstream. And so, there's the purchasing decisions, but also, some companies have upstream and downstream leased assets that they don't have employees in, but they will lease them out to other groups or other private entities. Then you also have companies that are tracking the products that they sell, things like that. But the ones that Sean sort of has on this list is more so what we're looking at as Benton County.
And when we're talking construction and new facilities, that falls under the purchased goods and services, correct? So that during those construction periods, those emissions are going to be much higher and the embedded carbon is also high.
Construction is something we'll get into in that slide. It's kind of what we put that on its own, and we'll talk about that a little later. It is something that's, you sent out the email to us about, the scope 3 conundrum. We'll get to that slide later on, and we'll address construction then, but that's its own.
Okay.
That's its own separate thing. But it's a great point though. So what, this is our actual list. Again, usually we'll present on the sources, not the scopes, but moving forward, we're going to have to, and by the way, the inventory itself is organized like this. We just don't bore you with up until today. So sorry about that. Fleet fuel reimbursed finance. Sorry, I'm pointing at you still. Sorry. Finance is now tracking reimbursed miles, and which is great. When you drive here, most of you who do, if you drive here, you're commuting, and then magically your car turns into a fleet. And so now that's what we're adding that into. Natural gas, refrigerants, electricity, water, we've been doing, the only new ones are going to be commuting and travel. So this kind of gives you the sources for the scope. So what I want to do next is focus exclusively on 1 and 2, because we're doing some really great things. And by we, I mean Paul back there, to really move that 1 and 2 down. So what we're going to be looking at is the new 5. So what, in talking with Paul, what we did, and by we, I mean Sydney, brought down each emission per square foot of the existing facilities and then projected out what that would be for our new facilities. In talking with staff here, Paul, Rick, and others, the BOC and the courthouse annex, we're talking about either offloading or selling. And this is the first bullet, the first slide where I want to start kind of getting into where I started of what are the decisions being made? How are we making those decisions? We're talking about these things, but how are we addressing them? And so this is one where, again, we're talking a lot about this. What will that be? And again, I don't know if Paul has input on this or always leaving it up to him. But where is that going? Because we really don't have a facilities plan. And so what does that mean? And how are we moving forward with that? And I hope I characterized that correctly, Paul.
Paul, do you want to join us at the table?
Sorry.
You're most welcome.
So close.
Easier for people online to hear you if you're nearer the mics.
I don't know if you had, if you have or.
John's correct. We don't currently have a written formal facilities plan. But currently, Mr. Krager, Gary Stockoff, the Director of Public Works, and I are discussing that robustly in an effort to move that forward.
And again, I'm hoping this is a conversation because these are some of the conversations we're having. It was just very insightful to say, okay, where are these missing pieces and what's moving forward? So again, these are being addressed. Then also looking at new FTE, again, talking to Rick, we're not really expecting another 150 in the next 2 or 3 years. But it's having Rachel and Rick, we kind of hit 35 would be a good number just to start putting in.
Yeah, I guess so commissioners know, and obviously, as we talked a lot about, budget challenges as we go forward. And I think mostly what we're thinking with the new FT is obviously going to have an uptick with operational costs for a new crisis center. So that's one big piece. And then the second, of course, is what is the size of the jail going to be in terms of future operations? So I think for assumption purposes, it's pretty much a flatline budget in terms of growth, but we know that we have some of these increased operations. So just want to be very transparent with you, so you're not thinking we're looking to enhance the budget further than operational needs. Excuse me.
And then on that, just super quick, as Rick was saying, our scenario builder you give us a square feet and we can adjust that. And we were doing that up until last Thursday, not in a bad way, but just like people, this is in flux. And so this allows us, you give us the numbers and we can start to give you better projections. Commissioner, I think I interrupted you.
Oh, I just saw that one of the bullets is sell BOC office and courthouse annex. I know that's been tossed out there. I wasn't sure. Is that a for sure? That's the plan now.
That's what I think that's, the key here assumptions is that, we've had those, but obviously the final decision will rest with the board in terms of doing that. But just in terms of giving you a number, these were the assumptions that we made.
Thank you.
Yes. And great question. I mean, every slide is going to be bringing up additional questions and how we're moving forward and who's making those decisions. Very much so than that great last. So this is the assumption on electrification. It was really great talking to Paul. A couple of these facilities will not be using natural gas. And we can calculate what those savings are. That's huge because there is no blue sky for natural gas. So if we can stop using it out of the gate and reducing the usage, that's going to have a huge impact. We also calculated or assumed electrifying our fleet. I just picked 8 sedans and 4 buses. I want to stop here for a second because here we go with another Commissioner Weiss is just saying these are assumptions, but these aren't decisions. And I know that we have 8 or 6 buses earmarked. Cedar Corvallis has 2 electric buses sitting there collecting dust over there at Public Works because they don't have a charging station. Yep. So again, Rick, thank you so much. It's like we can talk about these things all we want, but what's actually happening? And talking to Crystal McGuire, no relations. We have about 20 sedans currently. And what could that impact be? And I'm going to show you a slide from that as well. But I just kind of want to get into you, Commissioner Weiss. We are talking about these things and what's moving forward, what's not moving forward is the reason why we're here today. Third bullet, offsetting 90% of electricity. We can never get to 100 because of consumer power. So that we can only deal with Pacific. Again, consumer power is so clean, it's not that big of a deal. But it's also not just, I dream of genie and all of a sudden it just happens. Blue sky, yes, but the other service, now Arcadia, we have to assign facilities. We have to wait until those opportunities occur. So we're kind of reactive. So we thought 90% was a fair number to be looking at.
So
That's 90% is the goal.
90% of all electricity, correct. That's what we're trying to get to.
And when you talk about electricity offset, that is just for the electricity part, like Blue Sky, you said.
Blue Sky and the community solar program.
Doesn't have anything to do with the other offsets that we.
Correct. And thank you, that's perfect. So this is all on electricity. Last slide, we'll have to get into how do we actually get there? And that's more on the climate action plan that Jen and I'll be coming into. Again, I just really want to look at where we're going inventory wise, and then we'll get into the actual game. So this is our utility usage impact that we calculated. That extra 5 facilities are going to be looking at about 1,300 tons. And again, this is Rick and I on the jail, the size of the jail. Paul talking about most of that. A lot of that is coming from natural gas, from some of the bigger facilities. But getting that 16 tons, I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but the crisis center and EOC are scheduled to be fairly small in comparison. And so if we can get more of that, it'd be fantastic on the gas. And then the selling of the old BOC, the bank and the annex. I put that 85 tons in there because this is all in 2019. Adam IT was upstairs we were downstairs. That's kind of how pre-COVID it was working. Now that there's not over, it's not being utilized as much. That's why it kind of dipped down. So I just wanted to give some background on that. So here's the one on electrifying our fleet. So it's a two-step plan. One, getting those 8 sedans and 4 buses, reducing our fuel is 224 tons. Then to re-electrify them is adding on 131. And Paul and I have had this conversation, just because we're electrifying doesn't mean it magically goes away. Those things use a lot of electricity. Still, the tonnage is going to go down just with those 2 sources. What it also opens the door is if we can use Pacific Power or somebody to take that, we could be taking 220 or 225 tons. That is not insignificant. So I want to stop right now before we get to the next slide and see if there's any questions or if I missed anything from you two.
Just on the current slide, potential savings is if we get to 90%.
Correct.
Offset.
Correct. And now when we can, because, and I'm going to look at Paul and Rick on this, right now we're looking at facilities within the Pacific grid. The only one is the fairgrounds. It's on consumer. Everything else is on Pacific. So that gives us that opportunity. If it is, I know Jen and Paul did the feasibility over at Sunset, that would get to that point. So that's where we could actually get to that 225, whatever, just offsetting those vehicles.
And would you go over the difference between Pacific Power and Consumer Power?
I wish we had, I just feel like I'm dissing on Pacific, but it's demonstrably cleaner. I was the last year in 2022 was all the facilities and consumer was only 50 tons. All of our electricity is 1,300. So that kind of gives you the impact Pacific. It is not, I think the solar panels are in general from the fairgrounds here about the savings from the solar panels of the fairgrounds are only 2 tons. Consumer is so clean and most of theirs coming from non-coal that it's almost solar power.
Consumer Power is mostly Bonneville.
Exactly.
And,
Yeah.
and Pacific Power buys a lot of coal-fired generated electricity from other states.
Correct. Now, getting into your conflicting, in Maryland, we didn't count dams as renewable. I'm not saying we should, I'm just saying, getting back into these, so, but yes, the answer is way clean.
And they're already projecting declines in power generation from the Columbia because of changes in stream flow and snowpacks.
Want to step in here and want to prep Rick for this. So we're talking about our electrifying our fleet. I also know we're having discussions from the enterprise report about, and we've seen budget enterprises get rid of their entire electrical fleet. And I wanted to bring that up because this is an internal conversation, but I don't know if they'll want to keep you up on the enterprise.
I mean, this is just, obviously a research phase and having discussions about how to be as efficient as possible with both our internal and external fleet. And these are discussions, obviously, we'll be having a lot more here in the next couple months. But one of the areas that we've just been looking at, because we're hearing a lot of local government as well as businesses are moving towards more of a contracted fleet type opportunity. And so we've been engaging with enterprise just to have discussions about where we can be more efficient, and we've been able to provide them information about our fleet just to get an analysis of where there could be those particular opportunities. I think, the challenge of course, with, as they like to put within the electrifying fleet, is that the value that you get in terms of the emission savings, but also there is a cost piece that you have to look at as well, because they always kind of compare it to the cell phone. It's a quicker turnover. You're going to have to really be thoughtful in terms of the depreciation. It goes a lot quicker, and how do you get the most value? So those are things that they have added for us that have to be viewed. I think a lot of the local governments are moving more to a hybrid approach, obviously with their vehicles, but that's just something we'll have to factor in as we go forward is how do you maintain those vehicles? How do you ensure that you're turning them over in a method that enables you to be financially viable as well? So again, those are, again, I want to just point out, those are very early discussions and just trying to get more thoughtful about how we approach it. You know, Rich has been a real champion in terms of helping us think about, you know, how do we move to the more electrifying of that? And, you know, she has some experience with us, so in Albany in terms of working in enterprises as a resource or any contractor for that matter.
And there are grants out there for this. So again, no decision making at this point. I just wanted to share some of these conversations going on behind the scene. Right now, we are purchasing 25% of our electricity from Blue Sky from the budget you approved last year. You know, kicking that up to full would be about 20,000 a year. I think that's a conversation to have as a budgetary discussion if you're thinking. This was not small. I mean, this slide is not small, looking at that, how we're moving forward. We need to be fiscally sustainable as well as reaching our own greenhouse gas goals. Any other questions on that one? So here's a slide of just scopes 1 and 2, the things that we have total control over, at least from our facilities fleet. This is the addition of the 5 facilities, reduction of the BOC and annex, less natural gas from the 2 sources that Paul identified. The McBee property that you approved, I think last month. In talking to Jesse Ott, there's acreage there that he can do the same for Benzell. So we added on another, I think 5 to 10 tons on that one. We are required to install and use 1.5% of the funds for new construction. Added on another 30 tons, I think, for electricity reductions, assuming it's solar or some sort of energy reduction. The sedans at 9%, and this is what we've come up with. That is nuts. That's not insignificant. That's a 2,000 ton reduction if these things start to happen. Again, we're not talking about the cap. That's what Jen is working with directors on, but just to start looking at the inventory numbers, that's not small. And so this is from the scenario builder, what we're. Okay. Before we move on to scope 3 and really fun discussions, any questions on this one?
So the big leap in scope 2.
That's electricity. That is going 90% of orange is basically electricity. So hitting that 90%, you're taking that 2393 down to 242. And the reduction in gas is the blue, which is coming from savings from Paul.
Got it.
That's it.
But it is safe to say the moral of the story is that, you know, the target area of 2030, we have a real opportunity here, and actions that we have been taking, while it may look like there's this increasing, we have this opportunity with the projected actions you have to get very, very, very close to the goal that we instead. And so when we just talked about electrifying number of sedans and buses, that was just the slide you had before.
Right.
If you were to go more, perhaps you're getting right on that goal. So I think, you know, while you might see this uptick here, I think the piece that to really focus on is that 1824, which is pretty darn close. I mean, you obviously can see where you're at in 2010 to where you projected to go in 2030. But there's still some work to be done. And I think it's, I guess from my standpoint, it's reachable here from a scope 1 and 2. Is that a fair statement?
Queued me up perfectly. Okay, thank you. And I want
Just to piggyback off of Rick's statement, so I can't remember, as part of your and Jen's presentation, do you ever talk about how much we have saved? You know, even if it's going up, I mean, that could be a really good messaging to send out to the community.
that's
because-
exactly where I wanted to
Okay,
next.
okay.
What's high, in beginning scope 3, you'll see it just, the great work that Paul is doing. We're updating for 2023. Avery is down 4% electricity. LEB is down 6% electricity. Sunset is down 8% electricity. I'm sure that has something to do with the move, but still, we're watching facilities, natural gas, all these will go down, and you're gonna hear about that in May. Period. Steely and Missile Man just taking our facilities way, way down. The challenge becomes when we start looking at these other growth and how it it becomes overpowering and we're not even talking about scope 3. So we are doing these great rates. We are committed. We are watching our specific facilities go down without question. How can we better capture that and use that as our goal? That's why we're here, right? Set it perfect.
So the other thing that helps is to look at emissions per square foot,
That's exactly-
per FTE, and we actually do that as well. But those capture some of the gains.
FTE is going down and spot on. Previously, we've been in so much flux because again, we're not just facilities. We have water pumps and street lights and all, it's not just facilities. So for the May presentation, since we have a little more breadth, we're going to be probably more on the building. Like I just said, we looked at Avery, LEB, Sunset, Cal, all those, and to see how they're going down with the natural gas, because I know LEB went down 6% because of natural gas because of the new boiler you put in, correct? So we're watching these things go down, and I'm seeing it tick when I get the email from Paul. So that's the, so yeah, moving that more toward identifying the great strides of things. Okay, so let's move on to the loveliness of scope 3. So during this, Commissioner Berger, you sent us a couple of emails calling it the scope 3 conundrum. This is the big challenge. So I want to be very, very clear when start getting into scope 3 is, these emissions, no Yahtzee dice are made in the creation of these numbers, I promise. Although they are not exact, and I'm going to be asking these two to kind of get some back on that. Data quality and is sometimes challenging. I think the best one we have in scope 3 is commuting, but even that, it's not perfect. I mean, you have survey. For instance, you identify how many days you drive and commute and all these things. Jen and I's first step is to go through and identify or figure out how people can work 6 days, 7 days, and even 8 days a week. They should get gold stars. If you're working 8 days a week, that's a committed employee. Again, it's a small number, but still, you just have to kind of walk through these things. Emissions estimates, but when we get into purchasing, which I'm going to ask Cindy to take up. These are made on budgetary decisions. So we buy a carbon neutral thing. It costs more. Our emissions went up, even though we know we bought something that is less emission intensive. Like, again, it's just not a perfect thing. The main thing of scope 3 is to look at it. We know we have an impact. It may not be perfect, but we have to address it. So, there. And then we still need to do it to be consistent and compliant. Corvallis is doing this. Rick, our previous apples to apples, oranges to oranges, making sure that we're doing the same across the board. So, so this is how some people like pie charts, other people like bar graphs, same data, but just in a different manner. The first one will be purchasing, and I want to give Sydney an opportunity to talk about how her research was in the supply chain.
Yeah, like Sean said, it's not perfect, but we look to the EPA greenhouse gas protocol. It's the gold standard for emissions accounting, and they have emissions factors for various categories of goods and services purchased, which is a big part of scope 3. This is sort of a reason we separate construction from other goods and services purchased, because we can look to the EPA greenhouse gas protocol, find their factor for paper, for instance, something pretty specific. This is why we like to have it consistent across the board, like Sean said. And we can take that emissions factor and use it as our coefficient for calculating, oh, we bought this quantity in paper, let's calculate how much we're emitting from that. So, basically.
That's all right. I think this might be a nice. We'll stop here to talk about construction because it is the kiddie table on Thanksgiving dinner. It's all kind of on its own. We some jurisdictions.
Loud and, sorry.
I'm sorry.
It's loud.
Yes, exactly. Oh, it's
Sorry.
loud, and there's a lot to it. So for instance, this is the one that not everyone, I'm going to lean in on Michael, not every entity uses, or they may calculate construction, but not use it in their inventory. The challenge is that what do you do with this? Like, we have to build these things. And it's a one-time shot. Everything else is every year. So where do you put, the first question is, where are you putting this? You can't just put it for, 2028 or something. That's off the chart, but then the next year you have nothing. Second is just the size. OSU, I'm talking to Brandon Felstead, who does theirs. Their current inventory total is 117,000. They have 10.5 million square feet. If we use the same coefficient that we use for our projected for our new facilities, theirs would be 510,000 tons. I mean, it's almost a triple, which is actually kind of the same ratio here we would have for us. So it's just, it's something that we need to address in the future, but it is so large. And then how do you account for it? And I know you had thoughts on the construction part.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a kind of, as you said earlier, Commissioner, I think the construction is something that would typically be captured in the purchasing side of scope 3. And I think a lot of companies will still account for that, but it's something that is not necessarily considered when we're factoring in goal setting and we're factoring in what should be our baseline moving forward, because it will sort of be this artificial blip where emissions go up pretty drastically and, isn't something that's going to be reflective of a number that we want to reduce on over time. However, a lot of companies will sort of re-baseline at a certain point. So if you are adding facilities, you will backcast so that is captured in the baseline so that it doesn't look like there's this artificial uptick over time in emissions as well.
So it's just a very complicated matter. We have coefficients to calculate. If we want to put that on the side, but exactly right now, we're thinking just kind of make the calculations for transparency purposes, but not part of our. We're not in the decision-making stage. That's in the future, but just to kind of, we're thinking about these things. We have numbers for them. We'll come in more formal when we have those out.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm having a bit of a hard time
Please.
figuring out what color and.
We kind of dove into the construction. Let me walk you through this.
Because there's 6 colors and
Yep, they're all over the place. Yes.
5 pieces of pie.
The blue and the orange are the ones from previous. Blue is scope 1, orange scope 2, and then the rest. We just want to showcase just how scope 3 dwarfs everything else. The 4,000 is as a color is purchasing. Now I want to take a step for that one. I'll walk through the slide. We kind of dove into construction. That is an estimate based on Corvallis. And that is a very low ball estimate. Theirs for 2022 was 4,500 tons from purchasing / supply chain that Sydney was talking about. They only have 400 employees. We have 600. So I went conservative on that one, but there's a good chance it could be more. So that's the green 4,000. And then the yellow is commuting the 1,200. Now, what Jen sent out last month, total miles went up 7%. So considering that and the ones who did not complete the survey, that would probably go up another 100. So just to kind of give you how that's moving forward. So that's kind of, it was basically just to show you just how it works and where the specific sources are coming. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, again, sorry, I wanted to go into that conversation
Yeah.
first, but I explained the slide.
And the travel waste.
Travel waste
So
combined.
small that they don't show up on the.
Travel and waste are 25 tons combined. And that travel comes directly from the budget. Getting exactly what Sydney was saying, we have the coefficient for travel for every $1,000, whatever it is, that's where it is, but yeah.
So that the travel coming from the budget might actually overestimate tonnage a little bit because we don't always use the full travel.
And that's exactly correct.
Yeah, but better to be there. Yeah.
And to give another perspective, going to Oregon State pre-COVID, talking to Brandon, travel isn't much for us because we're not going. It was 12% of their 120,000.
Wow.
With all of the professors and staff flying to conferences all over the world, that is very significant. It is not that case anymore. Tragic gift COVID was, but some of them not having to travel, being able to Zoom or whatever. So that gives some context.
So in terms of scope 3 and construction, are some companies also looking at kind of the depreciation model and looking at depreciating carbon over time? Or are they just looking at it as this a different type of investment and not part of the carbon budget at all?
Yeah, it's often when we use like spend-based factors, it's when the money is spent because the factors sort of come out in a 2019 USD 2021, and they'll sort of do that at a point in time. I think if it's depreciated, some of the what point in time do you associate that money spent with? And that can complicate also, how efficient certain technologies have become with the construction. And so it usually is just that
Point in time, okay.
But that is a point of conversation and a question we get asked a lot. Like, how do we, make sense to spread it over time? Because like, if we think about it, how we think about assets. And things like
Yeah.
that.
But from an analytical standpoint, the carbon was emitted
Right.
at that time. Yeah.
Exactly.
And these are some of the, again, starting out in the first 2 minutes of this presentation, we're having these conversations. There's no decision made. We definitely want to get our numbers more in line, and so you can make an informed decision with the most accurate.
Well, I really welcome it. When we make these decisions about new facilities and how to build and what to do and what kind of, what contractors to use and all of these things, we need to start talking about whether to include these values or not, because right now we are not embedding them in all of our decision making.
I really want to thank Paul and Gary, for having Jen and I into the early charrettes of the courthouse. That was really cool for us to hear what kind of HVAC, what kind of materials, this facility being LEED Gold, not just silver, but taking it to the next level, having these decisions, and that decision as a former Green Building Program Manager from Maryland, that has to be the very, very, very first decision. You don't go the whole way through and then duct tape a solar panel and call it a day. It's like, that has to be the very first decision. Giving you any ideas, Paul, no idea. But yeah, that's again, kind of why we're here, to start looking at how do we make those decisions and how is that employed on that last slide. This one is planting the seed. This is planting the seed, kind of getting some control last year, coming about what would our goal be? And if, when we say it's greenhouse gas emissions, what specifically are we talking about? We've been saying if we want to see the great impacts we're having, maybe focusing on 1 and 2. If we want our full ledger, 3, no decisions right now, we don't have all the data, but just wanted to show, and it all came from Rick, our conversation last week. Let's compare apples with apples and oranges to oranges. And that's what these two slides show. So I just wanted to show that these are the differences. But how we want to end, and hopefully maybe a minute or two over, but these are the questions that have been coming out with the 3 of us and talking to Paul and Rick and Gary. What is guiding our fundamental questions about facilities? Are we gonna offload? I know a plan is being discussed, but like, what does that actually look like? Fleet, and looking at Rick, again, centralizing that. Keith Nicholson just told a horror story. Department just walks in, buys the car, throws the keys, or modifies a truck and at Les Schwab and drops the keys on their desk and say, here you go. It's like, I don't think you understand how that works. And so our fleet policy, I know, is in flux. As finance is looking at a little more centralized purchasing, but who's making that decision? And as Rick said perfectly in our conversation earlier, what are the benefits and costs? Are we looking fiscal, purely greenhouse? Where's that middle ground? And then scope 3, what are we purchasing? Who makes that? Again, who's making that decision? And what's the criteria? Is it purely cost? Is it purely greenhouse? Is it somewhere in the middle? I don't know if we've figured that out just yet. Same thing with commute. Jen is doing a great job on the commuting. These are the questions that have come up.
Well, and adding in, are we using MWBE? Are we buying local? Are we getting best value? Are we following union practices? Like, there's a lot going into procurement, but it's also what are our goals, especially when it comes to that big chunk of purchasing.
Exactly. And, also with Rick, sorry, you moving into a new role. In the past 6 months, it's been impactful to go from Joe to having a new structure and more centralized. When I started here in 15, as you all know, every department basically had their own finance person. As we're starting to centralize that and getting into a flow, there's a lot of efficiency that can be made, and decisions are made automatically and not, each Game of Thrones castle doing their own thing. No dragons, just. So these are yeah, how are we gonna proceed with either official plans or criteria or what goals you have? These are some of the things that have popped up in the last couple of months. It's just been great, just having these conversations and just thoughtful and being purposeful moving forward. Commissioner Furman.
Back to Calapooya, I remember the discussions and, the Calapooya remodel. LEED certified, and I think our original goal was silver and can't remember some of the how we got to gold, but I think it's important to start out with our values, say, okay, and then short-term costs versus long-term benefits. And I think that should be the model going forward, whether it's electric vehicles as well. Okay, it'd be cheaper today if we do hybrid or clean diesel or, but does that reflect our values? And we're buying something that lasts 10 years or this building 100 years. And so to start with the values and then Rick will figure out how we can afford it. But I think Calapooya remodel is a good example of, I think, a fairly healthy process.
I have a question. Can you say again what OSU's target or you? I missed the
So-
number.
Okay, so right now they're at 117,000. I think, and again, that's statewide, that's not just here, that's the whole Oregon State University, all facilities. What I had mentioned was, pre-COVID, when they were about 120, 125,000 tons, their travel was 12% of that. Again, that's a lot of that.
And I'm sure that doesn't take into account all the student component, right?
Right.
Only people that are on payroll, so.
Or somehow get reimbursed, and that's the kind of the reimbursed miles or all these things. This whole inventory started with Rebecca Taylor. And Randy and Tally, who are now across the hall, and looking at this in IT, coming up with this utility tracker, Jennifer Mantooth, and finance enters in. We were only entering in money, like, which makes sense. I mean, you're just gonna pay a bill. That's when they started entering into usage, and that's what's allowing us to do this. Corvallis can only do this every other year because he has to go out and get all that data. Now that we have that the utility tracker, it's humming along. I know we had a little glitch in the fall. I guess it was a security opening or something like that. That's back online. That gives Paul the opportunity to go in there and to see, remember, like the last year, there was a water main break over there near the sheriff's office. Like, we can actually use these tools in the day-to-day operation. Which is, again, moving beyond just greenhouse gas, but also to making us as efficient as we possibly can. You've heard me say a million times, authorizing the new fleet data system that Keith was using, that Keith's chosen her. How long did it take you to do it before the months?
Couple minutes, yeah.
5 minutes?
Wow.
I mean, like, that's no joke. And so these kind of efficiencies really help us out.
Since we went back in time a little bit, could you go back a little further, since I was not a commissioner when the goal was set? Can we hear about what the basis was for the target goal? Was that based on best practice or what we thought was achievable, or?
So the first goal was very similar to what Corvallis has, more on the Kyoto back to 1990. Wasn't really a big 75% in 1990 by 2050, I believe is that. What we did in 1990. I mean, it was very difficult for us to calculate. Oddly enough, the month before COVID hit, February of 2020, is when it was approved to kick it up to more of the latest climate change science coming out. We really need to get that under the 1.5 degrees Celsius. We need, this is the goal.
Okay, so based on the methodology and the 1.5 degrees, okay.
So it was on the latest, that's where a lot of jurisdictions and companies moved to this one, half of 2010, and we had the data. Well, we can make it work.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So basically, this is what we need to do. This is what everyone, basically the whole world needs to do to be responsible and try to hit that goal.
This is getting much more aligned, much more aggressive. So that was, that, and you, it was great. I know City of Corvallis, Scott has said, hasn't not really fully adopted. You also have elected officials every 2 years, as you are keenly aware. You three, this is a high priority. It really is, and you have been aggressive. And that's what we need. And if we're actually gonna move some dials and actually do these things, it needs aggression. And that's what this goal was. So you are very much a part of this community to have that aggression. Okay,
Oh, no, I think that I was just going to say some of the same. That our goal is very standard for most, I think, governments that have adopted goals and for, because it comes directly from the international scientists documents.
I was just trying to get a sense for, at the time it was adopted, did the county think, oh yeah, this won't be that hard? Or was it just, oh shoot, this is gonna be a big undertaking?
Commissioner Wong, you and I stumbled across this with the questionnaires on the electeds, when it was a certain couple members in the community were saying, oh no, and our inventory team were just up here, oh, we won't, no, we're not. No, I've never presented any inventory that said we're anywhere close to our goal, so no, that is, and then that's when Jen, climate action plan, how we actually get there.
Thank you.
Yeah, to finish my thought on short-term, maybe cheaper if we're looking long-term. There's the internal discussion, and then there's Corey's job of, see, I got your attention and
Direct line.
of letting the wider community know that we're not being cheap and we're trying to meld being fiscally responsible with taking care of doing what we can to take care of the climate. And I think that's an important message to get out to the community, as we spend their money. And well, what are you spending it on? And well, why is this so expensive? Or but just here are our goals, and this is how we're trying to achieve them. So just kind of ongoing messaging. Our goals are driving our budgets and not vice versa.
On a couple of things, I know working at you and Adam and others as directors, aligning our 2040 expenditures and making the fiscal case and making sure that we can identify what we're spending our money on per core value and focus area. Same thing with greenhouse gas. I can promise you, we send that when we present with Jen and I do our annual presentation to the coalition. People listen, especially in this community, which I know all three of you are keenly aware. And to look at where we are, the net knows of the world, and Deborah's that we know who they are, who are committed to this, and to look at you as being leaders and being aggressive on this global crisis.
Well, I guess a question to maybe plant the seed for our future discussion with the commissioners, because obviously this isn't about making any decisions, but your last slide really, I felt like it was sort of summing up. I mean, we have an aggressive goal, but we all want to really, how do we turn up the temperature to be able to actually get to that point? Is it fair to say that obviously looking at our facilities and being efficient in the use of our facilities, potentially offloading some of our facilities, electrification of fleet or some more increased efficiency around the use of our fleet, and then commute miles is something that always seems to come up. I get lost a little bit in the scope 3 where if it's in or out, but I know Jen has done a great job in terms of really pushing how do we reduce commute miles. I guess what I'm looking for is how do we plant the seed for future discussions about how we get there? And are those kind of the 3 biggies, or is there something I'm missing in all this?
There's number one, That's what we discussed. That's what Jen and I will hit when we get into the climate action plan. How do we actually get there? It starts with the inventory, and this was a conversation about some of the discussion we've had. So that's number one. Number two, we need to do something drastically different. Like, we need to move to a far aggressive moves, whether that's with our fleet. Our facilities can only take us so far. I mean, I think you've said at some point, we're just gonna hit a floor where you're doing the LEDs, which will be another 9%. I'm sorry, interrupt.
No, we're close now. We've picked most of the low hanging fruit. And in order to move that needle forward from this point forward is going to require some very difficult decisions. Because as I'm famous as saying in facilities, right, there's never a right answer. It's only compromise. And where those compromises are made for energy use versus employee, environment and these sort of things are going to be fun to make.
So one is, what is our goal?
Right.
That,
How do we
that second to
measure it?
last slide is what are we capturing? What elements are we going to include? And then number two is, how aggressive do we really need to be without having to enter in purchasing of offsets? And that's, and I know we the three of us talk a lot about, that gets us into green scamming a little bit, and that gets a little mushy of what we're pushing. Is that fair, team?
Yeah.
So it needs to be aggressive. We can get there. I don't want to be doom and gloom. As you said, Rick, we can at the end. It's just going to take some big decisions.
I guess I would be a little bit curious about unpacking the purchasing component, because that is obviously so large. What is it that contributes the most? Is it all the paper, or is it, what is it that we're buying on a routine basis, month over month, that is adding up so greatly?
And that's why I didn't want to get into moving to a cap present or goals yet. That's going to be me sitting down, us sitting down with Jen Ambule or whomever in finance, looking at the budget. As Cindy said, we have the coefficients, and now it's just an alignment with the budget line. And then see what we.
Doing that analysis.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's something in the scope 3, I think, that we all need to kind of get in from a measurement standpoint.
Yeah.
Because I keep saying apples to apples, but I don't know that there is. And I think that's the part we need to get clear on.
Yeah.
But I do believe when we get apples to apples, we do have an opportunity here
Absolutely.
to really hit the goal, the real goal that was established. I think that's the first step. Unpack that, then be able to get really clear and crisp on what are those key goals that we're going to do, because they are possible. We can reduce facilities, we can be more efficient, we can electrify fleet, we can reduce commute miles. So I think if we can get that clarity, then we can really get to work and make it happen. I want to compliment Paul, though. He's done a heck of a job in terms of all the facility stuff, because going back to those charts, I mean, there is a difference maker. There's a story there that there is great work happening. And I just want to be able to get that point where we can really identify it more clear. So thanks, Paul.
I hope this was fruitful conversation. Again, not getting any decision making or getting how we get, but these are some of the issues, conflicts, conundrums,
Trade-offs.
trade-offs that we've been talking about that hopefully sets the stage for this decision-making moving forward.
That's great. It's very helpful.
And I just want to share with the audience this to do this and have this kind of open-minded, like, oh, this does that. It's been a fun ride. This. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, just a final comment. I appreciate, started out fairly limited in scope, how much electricity and then, which was a challenge to, go back and find out what we're really using, but it's gradually, okay, now we've got that on autopilot. Now what do we need to capture next? It shows if you keep after something, you can get better at it. And as far as the efficiency, and then what's next? What else do we need to include? So I think this is a great example of being having a consistent goal and gradually expanding the scope.
Well, I was just gonna say, just to your point, I wanted to just shout out Sydney and also what Jen has done too with the sort of process is always thought of as being iterative. And I think as you go, the idea is to be getting more faith in the data that you have so that we know when we're pulling on these levers, when Paul's making these decisions, that it's actually meaningful. And I think there's some things with scope theory where without a lot of granularity in the accounting, knowing which suppliers we're dealing with, there's not a lever to pull on, but I think there's all of the work that sustainability team has done, like Sydney and Sean this year, and then just actually getting real data from Jen's commuting, it's getting to the point where it's not a proxy data set that we're working with. Like when we pull these levers, we know that there's actually emissions that are being reduced. So I think this is just even from a consulting point of view, this is becoming like a very, very strong inventory to work with, and it's really meaningful.
Well, and it shows our commitment, that this isn't a box, okay, yeah, we did that, check that one off, and now let's do something completely different. No, this is gonna be with this and get better data. And I was thinking of even Amazon is starting to say, well, yeah, we can get that package to you really quickly. Had a friend who, Wilsonville area, who ordered at 7 a.m. He got his package before 8. Not that I really needed it, but just, okay, if you bundle your orders and maybe 2 or 3 days is okay. Maybe it's, we reward you with being cheaper or feel better, because there's a cost of the convenience. Here's your toothbrush, at 1 ounce. So looking forward to just gradually getting better numbers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a great discussion and I'm looking forward to the next steps.
See us next month. Be careful what you wish for.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next month is presentation of the whole thing and decision making, or?
That'll be the climate action plan, with that to be decided.
Okay. Yep. Just looking for the mile markers.
Yep.
Okay, thanks again. And we will move on now to our options for hybrid meeting security with Maura Kwiatkowski, Linda and Adam. Should we take a quick break or? I'd be happy to take a quick break. Be back there with you. Okay, we will get back to our agenda with item 3.3. Maura, you can lead us off.
Good morning, commissioners. Thanks for this opportunity to talk with you about the important issue of meeting security and accessibility. Amanda's going to just advance slides for us, but joining me today is IT Director Adam Lortz and IT Service Desk Manager Linda McGurl. So up on the screen, we've got a few bullet points of our most recent incident of being Zoom bombed and disruption of one of the Board of Commissioners meetings. I think most of you will recall that across the county, we have had a handful of other incidents similar to this in other meetings, including some of the disposal site groups that were meeting. Benton County Talks Trash had a disruption at least once.
Legislative breakfast.
Yes, our legislative breakfast was one. So they've been catching us across our meeting venues. So the purpose here today is to share with you some of the things that we have done to improve our meeting security and to present some other opportunities for you to consider to further enhance that security. And certainly what I know is paramount is not reducing or making accessibility to the government affairs, making it less accessible for people. So Amanda, if you'll go ahead and go to the next slide. This table shows a couple of tools that we've implemented already to enhance security. And I want to thank IT for some of these recommendations, because as they describe, people who are looking to disrupt meetings are basically scraping the internet, looking for open public type links. And they may be live streaming disruptive video to many sites at one time. So one of the first things that we did was we have moved to publishing our Zoom link just 1 hour before the meeting is expected to start. Previously, the link would be available as soon as we publish the packet, which is now about 6 days in advance. So it's sitting out there for quite a while. This does not impact accessibility in any way because the link has no value until the meeting begins and the board calls the meeting to order. The second thing we did was the Zoom link that is on the agenda and some of our other public places, rather than having a one-click start of the meeting, it takes people now to the meeting event page. So it does require one extra click, which we don't really feel has a disruptive effect on accessibility. The third thing we've done is a sort of an in-room while the meeting is going on is we've added an additional meeting co-host. And so when you see one of the staff people sitting in the back with a computer, they're monitoring and they're watching the participants. They're making sure that video and audio are muted. And if something pops up, they're able to respond immediately. Whereas previously the recorder is trying to take minutes and kind of keep an eye on what's going on in that meeting venue online. So we've added that, and I think that's working very well. Also, I think as you're all aware, May 7th, we'll be moving from Facebook to YouTube. This is, somewhat about security, but a lot of it is more about not requiring personal logins to intermingle with county business, and also will keep us from having the unintended consequences of having those Facebook pages. They can commingle. Lastly, I want to talk about the Zoom webinar a little bit, but I'm going to have Adam and Linda also talk about some other options that we can incorporate if we want to stay with the Zoom meeting, which is what we're currently using. We use a Zoom meeting, which is very interactive and collaborative. A lot of our regional areas are using Zoom webinar. It does require registration in advance, and it requires specific designation levels for the participants in the meeting. So it is probably the most restrictive form of meeting we would use. And so that's something if you want to consider. Like I said, our other regional partners across the area are using that. So there is some opportunity for a consistent expectation for people, who are engaging with our, online meetings. Amanda, if you could hit the next slide. So, this is the question that we're here looking for input from you all today, is following a discussion from Linda and Adam about the security options, is what steps, what level would you all feel comfortable getting to minimize the opportunities for disruption, continue to maximize our accessibility? But also keeping in mind that as we think about disruption and the security surrounding that, those disruptions, they do adversely impact accessibility because they're disrupting our constituents' ability to engage with their government. So what we're doing is we want to find that balance, provide you with the information, and see how you all feel about making any changes or not. So I'd like to turn it over to Linda and Adam, and they'll talk a little bit about some of the opportunities for security.
Yeah, so one of the things that we had just talked about as well, we started this last time, was also including the waiting room option. So when people join the meeting, they're not immediately in the meeting, they're actually coming into a waiting room. Added in a little splash page that basically has our logo, says, welcome, you'll be joined to the meeting shortly. So that way, when they come in, whoever that co-host is can actually take an opportunity and kind of just glance down the list of participants, see who's there, and then add them in. Part of what Zoom has now, we were just talking before this, has this additional features. We have more choices now because Zoom recently implemented this feature where Zoom meetings now can do registration. So we have option one would be to keep it as is, where we're just posting the link. Then people could just click the link, join the meetings. They would go into the waiting room. That is definitely something that we would encourage to keep. We definitely want all of our meetings across the board in the county to go into those waiting rooms. Then from there, somebody can accept them. The difference with the Zoom registrar piece, a Zoom meeting registration, excuse me, would be, it's a very similar setup to the Zoom meetings as they are now, but it does require registration. So it's an additional work on the staff side to set up the meeting. A little bit, I did it the other day, only takes a few extra minutes to do. It is going to basically run just like we would run a Zoom meeting. It just requires that extra step from people wanting to attend that they would need to register. The Zoom webinar feature is where you get into where you have different levels. You have your host, your co-host, you have panelists, and then you would have attendees. And it definitely is going to be limited because those attendees are never meant to share video. They're never meant to be as interactive. They can chat, and you can limit who they're chatting with. So they could definitely give feedback. But the idea is that anybody presenting would actually be designated as a panelist, so therefore they can speak and they could share. So there's kind of some differences there. Versus in the Zoom meeting with just registration, it's very similar to what we're used to right now, whereas somebody could unmute them. The co-host basically would ask to, as a moderator, would ask them to unmute themselves. They could unmute themselves, they could share. One of the things that I've noticed, and we'll still need to do some investigation on, is there's, even if we just go without registration or with registration in the Zoom meetings, there are some different additional security features in there that we can either make across the board decisions about. And so everyone in the county using Zoom is going to have those, or it can be on a by meeting basis. So things like they're never going to be able to share their video, options like that. So there's some additional restrictions in there that we could do.
So when you're saying that they can interact, what I'm concerned about is the integrity of like the commissioners hearing everything at the same time. Would this feature not allow someone to just reach out, say to Chair Ojala or Chair Malone or Commissioner Malone or Commissioner Wise? Like, can we put that in that wouldn't happen? I'm trying to.
Are we talking about like chatting? So they couldn't directly chat?
Feature that would be.
Yes.
Second option that, I'm Joe Smith and I just want to sit in Commissioner.
Yeah, actually, so you can direct chats to just the hosts. So basically it would be whoever set up as the co-host and then whoever started the meeting. So if Erica, for example, is the person who starts the meeting, those would be the only people who would see those messages are the hosts then. You can limit it so that they can't even talk to other participants, which is what we would want to do then to stop them from trying to chat to the commissioners or even amongst themselves. So there are ways to limit that too, yes.
And it just from a standardization standpoint, we make folks sign in if they're from the public in our meetings now, right? So if we were going to be looking at from an online level? Do we want to be consistent over both?
You're talking about signing up in order to speak,
So I can,
because they're the only people that sign in.
okay,
No one else does when they come in.
so with that reasoning, that would be the same thing if a participant wanted to speak online. They would have to give their name, address, and all that.
Yeah, so currently, what is your process for that? If someone is online and wants?
We just acknowledge them.
It's been very informal. but,
Oh, okay.
They'll raise their
Raise their
hand
hand,
or
yeah.
put a chat in
Okay.
or turn their audio on. to
So,
ask.
yeah, we could, I would recommend that we formalize that process somehow. So it could be, if we went to a registration process, it could be something where we ask, there's a couple of free form fields in there where we can put it in comments. So we could put in a comment with directions of, if you are wanting to speak, please email or call or however we want to do that.
They can't just do that in the registration itself.
So when they're registering, we can, I don't know, I'll have to look at it. I didn't actually, when I was playing with it, I didn't actually try to enter in my own comments when I was registering. But I do know in the setup field, there was places where you could put more directions or more information about the meeting. So we could definitely direct them to either email, or I'll have to see if there's a field that we can add where they could fit it in.
I'm not wanting to make it really cumbersome for someone online to
course.
comment, and I'm also
Yeah.
wondering if, because they're obviously, they would need to have access to be able to speak, and so they need a different level of permission
Yeah.
if we're in the webinar context.
The other option would be is if we went with just the registration, the Zoom meeting registration piece would be, we can allow them to chat the host. So whoever's the host then could see that someone wants to speak. And then they could, when it's the appropriate time, ask them to unmute themselves so they can therefore
That
speak.
makes sense.
There is a limitation, though, that in webinar, they're only allowed to enable audio, not video. So
Can't they be upgraded from an attendee to a panelist by the host if they need to speak? I'm sorry to cut you off.
that's okay.
Theoretically, there's other virtual meeting software allows you to do that. I'm assuming Zoom allows you to do that as well. I have not played with that particular feature yet, but
Other boards that I'm on have that. feature,
yes,
So
so
that's
I
what we do.
assume it's there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things we want to do if we go with the webinar concept is to limit the amount of work for board staff. And so if we can build in a process to identify those panelists before the meeting and those are set up,
That's what
and
I'm.
it takes
Yeah.
less distraction for them during the meeting and less to keep an eye on.
Mhm.
You know, it's a huge key that we're implementing a second co-host to take some of the burden off of Erica because it was clearly way too much to deal with. But then them having the opportunity to review all of that before a meeting, get it set up with the correct panelists and not have interruptions during the meeting. Of course, you're going to have these situations where you can't avoid it. And that's going to be the distinction between webinar and a standard meeting with registrations. The standard meeting with registrations, you have a couple more options, and participants can also be allowed to share video and audio, but it has to be enabled by the co-host. So that's kind of some of the differences.
Something I'd like to add too is if you look at our regional municipalities, almost all of them now have a request for public comment form online. And, you know, they can fill it out, their name, it's a name, we don't even need their address, but we need an email address. And then there's an opportunity then for them to comment right then and there. They can also sign up to comment physically in the meeting, or if they want to comment virtually. And so if they select that virtual option, then whether we go to whether we stay with the meeting with registration or move to a webinar, we can then identify those people as people that, you know, are authorized to participate, you know, as a panelist in the webinar, or somebody whose video and audio will be enabled. But it's pretty much across the region. That's how it's being done.
Yeah.
The extra benefit of that is that we're doing a better job of capturing our public comment.
In addition to that, the meeting management software that we're looking at, all three of the respondents that we've looked at so far have a feature built in to their system to have people identify themselves as someone that wants to make public comment. So that should streamline some of that a little bit, joining the meeting management software with our virtual meeting software.
That's what my other question. It's going to be stepwise because we have other software that's going to be coming in to the picture as well. I have a couple thoughts, but I know you have questions.
Yeah, I guess so is there a way that, so it sounds like when you're trying to join the meeting, you put in your email address and your name, and then at that time, there's the opportunity to say, I want to do public comment? Or is it, I just want to I think it's important that someone may not think that they want to do public comment, but once they get into the meeting, they might change their mind and say, you know what, I am going to say something. So for me, I just want to make sure that, we have all the protections and security, but that someone can still have that opportunity.
So no matter if you choose meeting or webinar format, there's always that chat option and they can chat directly to the hosts.
And we will have we will have someone who is hosting that has the ability to have the attention to that. And, okay.
Yeah, we have someone in the back as will be a dedicated,
Okay.
almost like a facilitator.
Which will help because I know that Commissioner Wise has been doing some of that from the dais as well. And,
Right.
and it's definitely difficult. I've tried to do both and it's not easy to.
There's always something, there's a million little things.
Exactly.
Kind of a distraction.
And people do chat directly to us.
So
They do chat, to the, or to the whole group. And it's, yeah.
But sometimes the chat thing is, it can be helpful when they're like, we can't hear you or something like that.
But that's,
Yeah, but otherwise, so on occasion, people will say, well, I don't think that's, fair, but I kind of liken that to someone sitting in the audience and standing up and yelling that out. So I'm not as concerned with those,
No.
but more or less but if there's a person back there monitoring that can see those chats, then I think that checks that.
And we would need a protocol. In other words, if there's somebody who were to chat and say, I would like to express my opinion on this, may I do that? We would need a protocol for, release that chat to the chair.
Okay.
So that, instead of like shouting across the room kind of thing or something like that. So.
Noting that without these protections in place, people at this point have been able to chat each other, and that should be a matter of public record, but it's not recorded. So it's also exposing us to that risk.
Okay.
Okay, that's a good point. And yeah, I don't want someone to type something yucky to somebody else in the meeting and, yeah.
So in terms of the Zoom meeting, the enhanced Zoom meeting with the waiting room and pre-registration versus the Zoom webinar, the biggest difference, as I understand it, is the ability in webinar to designate levels of access in advance.
Correct.
yes.
And I've attended meetings where that's in use and I've also seen that there is some flexibility so that a co-host that's moderating can shift someone to panelist status.
Yeah.
So it has some flexibility. It's more flexible than the go-to-meeting webinar.
Yeah.
That was atrocious. So I guess I don't have a strong feeling about the Zoom meeting versus the Zoom webinar if we use the enhanced features of Zoom meeting. And so I think it's more how much of a burden it places on staff.
Okay.
But I do have another question.
Well, I think the biggest change that we would be looking at regardless of which way we decide to go is the new requirement for the registration piece.
The other question is, can someone register, say it's 9:05, and I all of a sudden have the time to attend the meeting as a community member? Can I register at 9:05 and still get in?
Yes.
Okay, that's because that's important too. I don't think people should have to know a day before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or if they want to I'm sorry, if they're only interested in a particular item
Yes.
and they're watching the agenda and they said, oh, my item
Yeah.
looks like it's going to be here in 15 minutes, I'll jump in. So yeah, we want to be able to provide that opportunity.
Yeah, if you ever wanted to lock that down, though, there is that ability, but inherently, yes, as long as you don't lock the meeting down that specifically, there's actually a specific click that you have to do.
Yeah.
Then yes, they can go ahead and register after the event, basically, and start to any time.
They will be placed in the lobby in the.
Yes.
Slot lobby.
Yes.
I need to let them in.
Yeah.
I was just going to say the key with the registrations, and it does allow us a little bit more flexibility if that's what we're doing. The key to this whole thing was that we were publishing our meeting links publicly, right?
Yeah.
If we move to a registration link that takes them to a form instead, there's some security built around that, but it's not foolproof. If somebody really wanted to disrupt our meeting, they can go through the motions, right? So having the co-host in the lobby is the key to managing that. If we move to a registration process, we could probably also extend the window of when people can register for the meeting because it's a little more safe than having the link out there. So if we decide we want to do registrations, we could say, have the registration link up a few days before the meeting rather than the morning of.
Yeah, I think that that is probably beneficial for people.
Right.
Then they don't have to think about it at the last minute and just have one more scrambling thing to do. One of my other questions is about board meetings versus all advisory committee meetings. And I don't know what level of formality we want to go for some of those advisory committee meetings. And, you know, the event at DSAC wasn't a Zoom bomb. It was just, you know, a person who had their audio. It was not an intentional thing. Okay. It was an outburst.
Well, Benton County Tax Trash had a bomb with,
Yes.
it was very racist and.
Okay, and that I was not, okay.
So that's where I was going to say, as an example, we have already implemented webinars for when we did the Talks Trash meetings. I worked with Tom Dev on that. That's the way I laid out options. We at the time did not have this registration option with meetings. So it was either a meeting or webinar. That was our only options. So we laid out all those options and that's the route that they decided to go. And that's what they finished out all of their Talks Trash meetings using. So Linda and Daniel were really key on that. We walked through all their options, I sat with them and they did a test meeting so that we could play with the options. And that's how they basically proceeded after that situation. Actually, I think we had that and then one other minor situation and then we did that. So.
Yeah, the Zoom platform is primarily used for a public meeting format.
Yeah.
So we could make it so that all meetings created from our Zoom platform have some of these basic settings.
Waiting room is always a good idea. Yeah, pre-registration for advisory committee meetings probably would be a good idea.
Yep.
We can try it.
Yeah, I think it'll be a change for people, that's for sure.
So one of the features we can also train people to do is that when you're setting up a webinar or even it appears the Zoom meetings with registration, you can send invites directly out to people as well. So if we have the advisory committee, we already know who is supposed to be there at the bare minimum. Then those people who are managing those meetings can send out invites directly to them. They would just need them to accept the invite, register, and they're done. So.
I did want to point out a couple of the other things we ran into with the last incident, and one of those was that we've identified a protocol to shut down a meeting. And so the part of what the co-host is going to need to learn to do, aside from managing, attendance and moderating, is to know that the primary step is to stop the Zoom meeting. And with the waiting room and lobby option, that gives us some more flexibility. We can dump all participants to the waiting room. So rather than just being cut off from the meeting, they can be dumped to a waiting room and we can have a message up that says, be patient with us, we'll be back, or something like that. So we wouldn't have to go to the process of creating a new meeting, sending out new registrations. So it gives us a little bit more flexibility, but having that co-host role and being trained to manage all these kind of what to look for and what to do situations is going to be key.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking that if we should protocols for all of the advisory committee meetings as well, it means training all of the staff that support those advisory committees.
Yep.
I think that I don't see that as particularly time consuming, especially if we could train all those people at one time in a room and, the return on investment there, I think is definitely worth it.
I do also want to point out that Zoom is obviously a different meeting platform than we typically use. So, and there's a distinction there, right? So with Teams is aware of whether or not you're in our organization. So with Teams and the standard meeting setup, some of this security that we're talking about building into Zoom is already built in because it's capable of knowing if you're a county employee or allowed to be meeting with the organization. So this is much less of a concern with the Teams platform and really just more about Zoom and public meetings.
And
I was just gonna ask, is there a financial impact to this? Do we know?
No, so currently we actually have 2 webinar licenses already purchased that are in our account. They were purchased. One was for the JSIP project and one was for a different project. Neither one of those are being utilized at this time. So we're actually wasting money.
Okay.
So this would be, yeah. So we just need to transfer those licenses to the Board of Commissioners account.
Okay.
So.
And then obviously it's already staff that we already have hired that work here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no additional hiring requirement.
To be fair, they're doing, that's keeping them from doing other work that they could be doing, but it's still, it's very important, just.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that it, it does take, we do have an additional staff person in the meeting, taking that time. Again, when I look at return on investment versus disrupting the governing process, especially for our online constituents, to me, the ROI is there, so.
Definitely agree.
I do also want to point out that John from Horsepower Productions, his role is also distinct. So in these meetings, he's sort of acting like a producer, right? To manage camera views and microphones and make sure that the in-room experience is running well. That's distinct to the co-host and to the recorder.
So he's monitoring the in-room experience, but he's also making sure that it's streaming to that external platform, which will now be YouTube exclusively. And then, as I understand, we will be posting completed videos to Facebook, but they will not be streamed live.
It will be a link that if
It'll be
Facebook has
a
been their
YouTube
go-to, it'll be a link to the YouTube video.
That makes sense.
And again, our regional partners are all pretty much on YouTube. So they're part of this too. It's not necessarily a do what everybody else does, but look at providing a consistent experience to our stakeholders, depending on where they decide to engage. There's an expectation, and it makes it easy. To me, it increases accessibility because they get used to engaging in a similar way.
So did I hear, we're gonna stream to YouTube, and then did I hear that we will also, after the fact, we're just gonna put the link on Facebook, or actually, okay, not like there's not a way to re-stream it after the fact on Facebook. It's just gonna be a link. Maybe a link.
Yeah.
Just making sure I understand.
We also are going to be on the event page for the meeting where we, have the meeting information, agenda, meeting packet, minutes, action summary. We also will embed the video, the YouTube video, and we will embed the SoundCloud audio. So if a person, they can go to that page and engage in that meeting in any of those ways that works best for them.
That makes me so happy to hear. Thank you.
A couple things. I think we were a little slow reacting. This has been going on at least a year. We need to balance out being open and being secure and because the building, and we're pretty secure physically here, sign in, put your address, so we know who you are for the record. I think that would make sense online. Correct me if I'm wrong, but some email addresses are a little fee for getting back to those people versus this is where I live. It's nice to know if they're from California or from North Albany or, are you a constituent or are you somebody that has an interest in this topic from out of the area? I like consistent platforms. We all, it's just a Zoom meeting, there's the little icon to, just the mechanics of how to use this product and being consistent with other jurisdictions. I think is one, hopefully they've on the kind of use the product and this is working. That's why we're still using it. So us being consistent with that, I think makes sense and kind of evening up what we require in person and online makes sense. And we've had a lot more trouble with the online version than the in-person one. I think we need to address that so we can do our business and people that want to see what we're up to just get the business portion, not the extraneous Zoom bomb experience. So I appreciate the homework that's been done to say, okay, we used to do it this way. Well, we used to be able to wander around our buildings and unfortunately that doesn't work anymore. And we have to deal with that pesky reality and said we're further ahead physically than we are on Zoom type meetings, and it's time to step up our game.
So to summarize, I think what I'm hearing is that we would shift to Zoom webinar for our board meetings. And I would assume that they're using that for planning commission meetings as well. I don't know.
I'd have to double check, but I know we had done some of them using
Mhm.
webinar, but I'm not sure if they're currently, what they're currently doing.
Okay, and then most of the other advisory committee meetings, we would implement a Zoom meeting with a waiting room and pre-registration.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I do want to say that there are some of those meetings, typically the ones that have predefined team that are using Teams rather than.
there are some, you're right.
Yeah, like the Hope Board uses.
Hope uses Teams.
Yeah, and the MADAC uses Teams.
But the setting in the Teams meetings would align more with what
Yes,
we're setting.
It
up.
does. It has a waiting room, so,
Yes.
yeah. But not, we haven't been using pre-registration.
Correct.
Um,
And I don't,
Generally, just the attendees are being sent the link or the invite.
mhm.
I was gonna say, I don't feel as strongly about the advisory boards because I don't have a good sense of the need there. So I would defer that to whatever you guys think.
I
we
think-
should do.
From what I know, it's mostly that people leaving their mics off and expressing their opinions and disrupting the meetings unintentionally. It's not usually an intentional disruption. I've heard that in other advisory committee meetings I've been in as well, for these unintended disruptions. Not as pointed as the one at DSAC. So, yeah. And it's that role question too, and having someone there available to monitor and moderate. And when we talk to staff for any of the advisory committees, I think maybe thinking about training on that role as well, that for meeting moderation, because that's something that they really didn't have to do in the past, but now that we're meeting virtually, it's part of the role.
Well, and actually, so now that I think about it, so using the Historic Resources Commission as an example, look, we have issues with the link a lot, and there's always people that can't get on. And so having, Zoom sends you the thing, right, that says, here's your link, that actually would be helpful versus, staff trying to send something out and having
Last minute. Yeah.
issues,
Yeah.
so.
Although that's a Teams issue, or are they using Zoom? See, I think that we have an inconsistency across our advisory committees as
Right, I
well at
think
the moment.
I think there's some human error, but
Yeah.
Yeah, one other distinction between Teams and Zoom is we do have some groups that are meeting and using more of the collaborative features of Teams that are not available on Zoom. So they
Mhm.
collaborative documents, they can use some
Mhm.
better tools. So there's that distinction as well. Some of them benefit from those resources and others don't need them.
Yeah, but I think it's also a training issue. I think it's just an issue of what people are familiar with, and there hasn't been any attempt to educate or to bring people along to use a consistent platform.
I like the camera in Zoom better, but I don't know, GoToMeeting had the best camera, that maybe that's a little thing there, maybe.
The cameras are different?
Yes, and some of them flip you, like you see a reverse and some of them flip you the other way, and I feel like I can't look at myself.
The camera's the same, it's just their
The software,
processing.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay,
So just to confirm, we will move to the Zoom webinar for Board of Commissioners meetings, which will require pre-registration and some defining of roles on our part based on who's engaging with the agenda. And then it sounds to me like, is there more discussion on the boards, commissions and committees? Because they are, a lot of what they're doing, they do a lot of work, if you will.
It's interactive.
Adam mentioned the collaborative tools that are available in Teams, so is there a decision on that, or would you like to have more discussions or let them make that decision based on what works for their group?
Can I just say, I was gonna say, so what I did when we first started with GoToMeeting is I did have kind of that best practices information, so we can resurrect that. And then there was something we had done, I'll have to find it, where when we were transitioning between platforms, where and it might have been with GoToMeeting even versus webinar, where I kind of had a document that, or a B page that helped them, like, if you're doing this type of thing, here's what best recommendation is. If you're doing this type of meeting, here's the recommendation. We could resurrect that with
That would
current
be very
practices
useful.
and then have that available for
I think
staff.
that's a great idea.
Okay.
It would also be useful to know, what different advisory committees are using. Just so that we have that information. And so when we make these kinds of decisions, we know who we're affecting, because I don't know, sense that we completely understand that picture.
Well, we're also reshaping what information out there on the web we post for advisories committees, so
Yes.
maybe that can be part of it, is displaying the meeting platform.
Yes,
Mhm.
I agree. That would be very helpful. And again, consistency in the post-meeting information that's available for those advisory committees.
And just as an aside to that and a supplement, as Adam mentioned earlier, the meeting management platform, we did receive our 3 proposals on Friday, and the committee will begin meeting tomorrow to look at those. But as Adam mentioned, all 3 of the vendors that we invited have the opportunity where we can use unlimited boards, commissions and committees can use those platforms. So, depending, I have no idea what the cost looks like now, and certainly we'll get that to you as soon as we can, but that ability will also, that if we are able to move forward with a platform, there is a tremendous opportunity there to streamline things across the board.
That'd be great.
And provide that opportunity where no matter where you click, whether it's a Board of Commissioners or the Planning Commission or Natural Resources, you're gonna see all those same components for all the meetings. And just like I described what's going to be on our board pages, you can see that for those others.
That would be great. Look forward to that. And so just like with the shift from live streaming on Facebook to live streaming on YouTube, I'm assuming that making this change to shift to pre-registration, that we would give people some time, or would we do it abruptly?
I recommend we give people some time. We need to develop some messaging. This is a little bit more robust than simply moving to where we're live streaming.
Yeah.
So I would, like to engage the PIO and IT and develop some strategies for the change.
I think that's a good idea. Because some people will probably take it as an unfriendly thing. Anyone that was in the meeting. They got Zoom.
We could show them the-
And, I think we could point to Lane County, the city of Corvallis, who are all utilizing this type of a model. So,
You could also say we've encountered, 3 episodes of this kind of Zoom bombing, and enough is enough.
Yeah.
right, because it disrupts the process for the people who want to engage with their government as well. It's not just disrupting your ability to do business.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Thank you for all of your ideas and information. Okay, next we are,
Deciding today.
ooh, I think we just did decide to shift to Zoom webinar for board meetings. Are you, I don't think we need a formal board decision, actually. We own the license. We have the. Yeah,
The decision is for board meetings and then the advisory committees will see what they're currently doing.
Yeah.
What's.
Yes.
Well, there's a motion.
I will move to approve the use of Zoom webinar for Board of Commissioners meeting.
Second.
all in favor, please signify with an eye.
Hi.
Aye. My apologies, I did not take a look at the fact that there was a.
Where is it? What page is that on?
33.
33. Oh, I'm all the way in the 50s. Okay, thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to come back with a recommendation for an implementation date based on a strategy for communication and making sure that we have plenty of opportunity to get that out there. So I'll come back to you with an implementation date.
That sounds good. Thank you.
And I think it's important to say our neighbors are using this and we want to try to be as consistent as we can throughout the area. So the Lynn County meeting or a Corvallis meeting or this should be familiar.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 3.4. Last week, I received a request from community member Mike Huntington and Healthcare for All Oregon to suggesting a resolution to adopt to support a House resolution to go to Congress, the House Resolution 6270 in the matter of endorsement of the state-based Universal Health Care Act. What this particular resolution does is expresses support for the bill, which just would provide an easier pathway for a state to adopt universal health care legislation. Right now, Oregon is leading the path in terms of moving in that direction, and at the state legislature, the move towards a universal healthcare approach has received quite a lot of support. There's currently a commission that's working in that direction to set up a proposal for universal healthcare in Oregon, and this would just be one more piece of facilitating that outcome. But I wanted to bring it forth to all of us for discussion. I don't know where you all stand with respect to this movement, and so here is the in the packet, the resolution that has been reframed to reflect our standard form of resolution. That.
Would it be possible to like screen share it? So if anyone's watching, they can kind of see it or. Yeah.
So this resolution.
That's the checklist.
Our resolution does not have the effect of doing or implementing anything, nor does the House Resolution 6270 actually implement anything. It just facilitates the path for the state of Oregon to then implement its own legislation for state-based universal health care.
Looks like it's on our screens. Oh, there it is. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I support it.
I would entertain a motion.
I will move to adopt resolution number 2024-004 endorsing the state-based Universal Healthcare Act, House Resolution 6270.
Second.
All in favor, please signify with an eye.
Aye.
Aye.
And you know what? I spoke too soon. I was looking at, so what's playing online is not what's on the screen in here. No. I have too many screens, too many tabs on one screen.
Yes. So which one are you actually seeing?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
There it is.
Okay.
Yes, we did support it.
Yes.
So, yeah,
That was a very quick 15 minutes, so we saved ourselves a bunch of time.
good work.
Thank you. The next question or item on our agenda is sponsorship request from the Rotary Club of Philomath for the 2024 Salmon and Jazz event, which we did support last year. But last year was the first time we'd actually supported that, at least in a while.
How much did we support it last year?
Is that in the,
I don't know. I see a recommendation now that's 250. It was 250 last year, Mariah. Okay.
okay,
So I would move to approve sponsorship of the Rotary Club of Philomath's 2024 Salmon and Jazz event in the amount of $250.
Second?
all in favor, please signify with an eye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
So I think we get 2 tickets.
Oh, man, now we gotta fight over
Yep.
them.
And what's the date?
Good question.
the date is the 4th of May. It's a Saturday.
May 4th.
Well, we can,
I'm fine. I mean, I can always buy my own admission. I'm
Yeah.
fine. Yeah.
but I think we get 2 tickets with this. So.
Okay.
We can figure that out.
Okay.
Uh,
We've got a month, a little shy of a month.
Yep.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is county administrator updates.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Oh, wait, you're right. Thank you for the reminder.
It does say Rick Frager on it too. It is the third notice of non-payment, so. Okay. And actually, it was being emailed to me, so it's really on me, so.
We do have another item, and that is consideration of our NACO dues. NACO dues are much more affordable than Association of Oregon County dues. They, for this year, are $1,712. And I think it's been on us, but they've also had some processing issues because with even my registration for the conference, we had some issues. So I just need to get board approval to pay these dues, which are actually overdue. But
It's a calendar year.
it's calendar year. They were billed on November 2nd, 2023, but I think that was very shortly after Rachel first joined us.
They're still gonna get their money. They'll be fine.
Yeah.
I support it. I think it's a great value, especially just the legislative conference alone and
Yeah.
giving us the opportunity to be there and then
Mhm.
branch out and see our delegate has been just a great opportunity.
I'll move to support the payment of the NACO dues for 2024 in the amount of $1,712.
Second,
All in favor signify with an eye.
aye.
Aye. Done. And thank you for the reminder. Now we can move on to some administrator updates.
So recent county activities of note is I just completed a 6-week ICMA modernizing budgeting course towards the certification in the International County Management Association. I attended meetings with the Coastal and Valley City Managers and County Administrators meeting. There was an AOC summit. Then we talked a little bit more about the Measure 110 reforms implementation. There is always, as we just described, we have NACO, County Administrators Meetings, that are set up probably every other month. We talk about, major themes and what's going on in our counties from a national perspective. We have a crisis center NEPA study, that survey that we're working on. We are almost finishing up on our pay equity implementation. Well, of course, you all were part of the Public Health Week proclamation. And of course, all of you were also involved with the Congresswoman Val Hoyle's recent visit in the community, bringing in really added dollars, which is great. Some community engagement since our last goal setting. So that with Mr. Schaefer, Corvallis City Councilor, another visit to the Corvallis Museum. First time I attended a Rotary Club lunch was on Friday. I had an extensive tour of the Boys and Girls Club. Really, really impressive organization. They seem to have a very good partnership with the school system and water structure. I ran in the 5K Corvallis run on Saturday. I did get a medal. And I also attended the open house. Well, everybody gets medals.
Where is it?
I brought it in. I will. I was gonna decide which commissioner could have it each week, and then they could wear it.
I was gonna ask if it was a participation medal.
No, I finished it and it's live. And then after I broke a lung, I stopped in at the open house for the new Cracks Art Center.
Yeah.
I think some of the other folks were able to see it. It's really, really an impressive facility. I encourage anybody to go. Professional organizational activities, National Association of County Administrators. I attended the Lynn Benton Women's Leadership Group, got invited to hang out with a lot of folks over there, many county judges and leadership over in Lynn County. And of course, I attended the Hope Advisory Board meeting, which is plugging along. Some upcoming meetings, of course, we had a briefing with UPD Consulting. I was interviewed yesterday extensively on what we're going to be looking from for our EDI and, really emphasizing that change management and performance management that we want to work on with all of our leaders to look at the position of our EDI position and also setting up for success, as I said earlier. Again, the other project that's kind of going to be very interesting and working closely with the sheriff as well as Rick Krager is the Jails and Justice Center National Prison Group debrief. We're getting really close to really working closely with them and moving forward in conversations on a new correctional facility. I have a meeting with Christopher Jacobs from the Corvallis Economic Development. I'm really looking forward to that. I'm attending the HB 4123 Summit on Rural Homelessness up in Salem. Something kind of interesting for me is I'm being interviewed by the Harvard Kennedy School as an alumni story by Grace Fisher for their magazine on my move from Albany, New York to Benton County. And that's kind of fun. And then I'll also be touring the CBDC with Allison Hopgood of the Navigation Center. That is a part that we also want to move forward with some of our goals. Any questions?
Did you sleep in any of that?
I will say Monday and Tuesday, I've been a little sluggish today and yesterday. So yeah, I did nap. So
Good.
Yeah, it was a very full-time. What's going on?
there's been a lot of opportunity to meet a lot of people, but yeah, that run took a little out of me, so. I made up for it.
Well, the other thing that you did was put together your summary of your first 6 months accomplishments, and that
helps.
a big chunk of work too. Many other questions for Rachel? Okay. Who would like to go next?
I need a minute here.
Rick, do you have anything to report?
No, I think I would just, because I know it's in the interest of all of you, House Bill 5204, which is for the CJC program, that's being the reflection program. I just got noticed that the application is open. Today, so I'm sure all of you, I have access to that now as the contact, and I will be attending the webinar on Thursday, and also working with the sheriff, the DA, behavioral health folks to determine exactly how we respond to that. So I'll keep you posted. I think this first step seems to be more of a kind of a acceptance.
Yes.
I don't think it's real specific, but keep you posted. Tracking very closely.
And I know that they also, the CJC posted the dollar amounts of the allocation formula of monies that are coming to us for this purpose, and they are not large. So the half of our full allocation is somewhere around $50,000, which, yes, is sufficient for planning. It's not sufficient for a whole lot more. And from my perspective, I think one of the things we need to be looking at is some of the federal dollars that are abundantly available right now for implementation programs. And we did get fair warning from the folks at NACO that because of the cuts in appropriations to a lot of these federal justice programs, they got pretty much a 10% across the board cut. That right now there's money available, but they can't guarantee that in the next fiscal year there will be. So that may want to consider that strongly.
Yeah, looking at the formula right now, it shows Benton County at 231,000.
Yeah, so 100,000 and okay, and then return. I'd have the half. Okay. Still not a ton. One of the ways that Damien has expressed what our opportunities are, that we have most of the ingredients for what we need for a deflection program, but we certainly don't have the recipe yet. And we need to figure out exactly how we want to meld the resources that we have available between the core team and the sheriff's office and our harm reduction team and other community partners and law enforcement, especially Corvallis Police Department, and figure out how it's going to work. What's the system going to be? So, yeah.
I think it's a future goal setting.
I think
Probably, even if it's just a small update, we don't have the pieces together, that we could look at, even momentum, like Damien, you know, maybe great. So,
yeah,
it doesn't have to be figured out yet.
No.
It'd be nice to, right?
and even the proposal for the first half of the money is just like a paragraph.
It's like two questions.
Yeah, it doesn't take a lot because the intent was to get the money to us so that we could do the planning.
Right. The other thing, I just to let you guys know that updated at the leadership team last week on the operations center. I told you that we were researching. We'll got an update today that based on that research, looks like we might be able to get about 7,000. Which I know Sheriff has just said he was really happy to see that we were getting closer. I remember that's about 600 square feet. Talking about at the leadership team meeting, so that would be really cool. So good news on that. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
I can go unless you want to go, Pat.
Have at it.
Okay.
I'm
Let's-
getting closer.
Okay. I attended the Chamber of Commerce meeting last week, and some of it, there was a conversation about a debrief on Celebrate Corvallis. And so I would just say if anybody has feedback about Celebrate Corvallis, share it with the board chairs. You can also share it with me and I could tell them, but I think it's always better when they hear it directly versus, you know, I mean, I can just generally share feedback, but anyone is open to do that, or able to do that.
Good event.
Yeah, I thought it was a good event. Yeah, there's just, you know, it's a large event and they just want to know, you know, what they could have done better or concerns people had. One of the concerns was just the process of how people were chosen and the methodology used to determine winners. And the chamber board really has no idea how that happened. It was handled by the JCs. Anyway, yesterday I chaired the local officials advisory committee, which is advisory to the LCDC and the DLCD. And they presented to us yesterday in a special meeting their policy option packages for the 25 budget. And they basically have $40 million in asks, so they know that they're not going to get not just all of it, but they're going to get far less than that. So just giving feedback about, you know, what's important to counties and cities. That committee also has city councilors on it and mayors. One piece that has been called out by AOC and LOC has to do with the Housing Accountability and Production Office, HAPO. And the way that they are budgeting protects, it sounds like it protects in their FTE so that they will have people, they will have staff to help counties and cities with that, but it does not lock in funding. So funding is still going to be dependent on the legislature from year to year. So that might mean a whole lot of working with the legislature, a lot of effort going into asking every year, hey, make sure that money is there. So that's just a concern that we ran up the ladder and will be shared with the LCDC, the Land Conservation Development Commission. So if anybody has any feedback on that, I'm happy to pass it along. People are also welcome to attend the next LCDC meeting. They're all public meetings.
Can you tell me what LCDC is?
Yes, the Land Conservation and Development Commission.
Okay.
Which is the commission for the department. The department is the Department of the DLCD, the Department of Land Conservation and Development. Oregon Department, the commission oversees the department along with the director.
Thank you.
Yeah. So lots of moving pieces there. And then there's two things happening Wednesday night, tomorrow night. So there's the Corvallis Chambers having a forum for candidates. So state candidates and county candidates. They are limiting the number of people. So first come, first served. That same night is also the Starker Lecture Series out at PV Lodge. So I don't know, I obviously can't go because I'm going to be participating in the forum, but if anyone else is going to go, let me know how it goes.
It's on my calendar, but I hadn't connected the same time.
Yes.
Evening.
Yeah. And the chamber did say that they will be recording the forum and we'll have it, people can watch the video afterward. And question.
Well, I know that for the forum, that it's being held in the meeting room at the Corvallis Public Library,
Yes.
Corvallis Benton Public Library. And the capacity is limited to 120 and that room can fill up.
Yes, very quickly. So the fire marshal has cracked down and said, we absolutely need to make sure that that's,
So I'm really glad they're making recording available afterwards.
So the idea that if you do attend in person, you need to register
just get there early.
or get there. Okay.
Yeah. And then don't park in the library parking garage because they will close it when the library closes, even though the forum is still going on, and then you won't be able to get your car up. And then the other thing I wanted to highlight was Saturday, the 20th. OSU is hosting the Out of the Darkness Campus Walk, which is a walk to basically bring awareness about suicide and suicide prevention. So I will be participating in that with my kids. That goes from 9 until noon, and I think the actual walk is at 10. And I think that's all that I have for now.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Okay.
There's a reason we're tired. Start with Val Hoyle's visit last Thursday. Great opportunity to show her our projects that she helped is helping fund, and kind of a reinforcement loop of trying to make projects instead of just words on paper. This is Monroe, this is the Monroe Clinic that's connected to the school, and with inadequate space and with your help, we can do something about that. So Corey, I thought that was a well orchestrated visit. It was nice that we were able to, I guess, couple weeks before, do a run through and get an idea of the lay of the land and just, I think we were on schedule, which can be hard when you're moving around the county, but I thought that was a great visit, great opportunity to thank Val and connect with her staff, which are critical in getting information, background on what Benton County's up to. I made as much use as I could from a couple things we got last week, and one's the Rick and Lindsay's summary of 2025 congressionally directed spending requests, and a one pager and with priorities. And I think Jackson Fraser, after some discussion with the Jackson Fraser Boardwalk, they need million, so where to go, 800,000 to complete the project. And everybody likes to be the last one to contribute to put you over the top. So I think that's a nice discrete project and connects with is adjacent to Owen Greenbelt Land Trust, Owens Farm, and the hospital has some acreage for trails just across 99W. And so as a follow-up, I've got a meeting with Sherry Brubaker, Wells, Stafford to tour the boardwalk Thursday. So just trying to make that project as real as we can and make sure it's on their radar. So having a 3 or 4 projects that we're asking, and my impression is the Congresswoman and staff talk to Berkeley and Wyden staff and look at our requests. And yeah, we could do that one, or mix and match, trade them with your friends, kind of approach. But we're asking one project from Val Hoyle, and that's the Jackson Fraser project. The other thing that was handy to have, and, as Rick says, work in progress, but last Wednesday at the leadership team, lining out a partial list of our projects. And so when the elected staffer says, well, how are you doing? And so I pivot to say, well, I'm okay and a little tired because of all the projects we have going here. And it is, I mean, you lose track. You say, well, the courthouse, you can't lose track of that because it's a big one. But just the others, and it's a nice summary, and I asked Lindsay to put it on letterhead so it's a little prettier for distribution to people that we need to keep informed that the county's really busy, and a little bit unfortunate that the crisis center got delayed. I mean, it's kind of a whole bunch is happening simultaneously, which is less than ideal, but that's what we got. And it's nice to have estimated completion dates that may change a little bit. And this one didn't have a date on it, but I assume that
She'll put so that was one thing I'd asked Lindsay to do, is keep in mind, this is a status report at a certain period of time. Our objective, and Jill and I talked about wanting to make sure you have a dashboard or some easy and quick way to see these projects where we're at, not only these, but everything we're doing, because we have a lot. So it'll get more refined and a little more, not as perhaps as busy as this, but at least this is a start to be able to have something, so you can know exactly where we're at. So we'll get better at it in terms of putting some, like I said, something that's good for you to quickly access as well as the community for transparency.
Well, I'll jump to Sunday and Senator Merkley's visit with local electeds. The half hour preceding the town hall and having our list of ask for next fiscal year. And I'll be able to follow up with staffers on, I'll send it by email and make sure they have access to our what we're up to and what we would like to be up to. So it's was very timely. One thing out of the town hall is the anti-expansion, landfill expansion folks were there in force and managed to spend quite a bit of time saying how terrible the landfill is and how the with the expansion that will double the size of the landfills. That's an interesting, I hadn't seen that number before. I think I'll talk to Darren and see if we can get some actual information down on what we're up to and get that to specifically to Berkeley staff to say, well, you heard some things that maybe weren't 100% true or true at all Sunday, and this is what we actually are doing. So, as the senator pointed out, between the E and Wyden are probably the only two senators in the country doing town halls for free. You can see your senator for free, at least once a year in your county in Western Oregon. There, if you want to see him again, there's Polk County, Lynn County, and Lane County. It's a real service to constituents to say, here I am, give me your best shot, and we'll do. But that we shouldn't take that for granted or say, oh yeah, the town halls. This is kind of a big deal and a large commitment of their free time to travel around the state and make themselves available. So back to last Thursday, the other thing I was involved with. Not exactly sure who put it together. There was a broadband meeting at Alarica there in Alarica's new headquarters there in Paloma, USDA. Couple of people were there saying resources available and giving some hints how to what we might do to access some of those funds. Both Pioneer Telephone and Consumer Power folks were there. Pioneer has done very well. I think they have two $25 million grants to improve broadband in their service territory, which is considerable. rural areas. They are also in the Walport area, and they got the leftover territory after the private companies carved out. Well, I want where all the people are, and then large gaps in between. In this case, Pioneer is doing their best to fill. Rachel Maddox Hughes was there, and I assume she's still guiding our efforts. Because it seems like this goes in spurts. You hear something about broadband, or at least personally hear something, a lot going on, and then don't hear much for months. Things are going on. Last summer I saw a contractor for Pioneer putting cable on Kings Valley Highway. You could see it because they were pushing it to the utility poles. And the original wire was about this big, and the one they were putting up was about this big. And so there is fiber optic in my neighborhood. I need to check just what their schedule is for the last mile, and my house is actually the last 400 feet. But so that when I am on Zoom meetings, you don't freeze up. Is that me? Is that me? Or is that everybody? Or so it's exciting. I saw something from AOC saying there's an opportunity to get on the state committee, county commissioner. You know anything about that? Or
That was the one on broadband issues?
yeah, just last week.
Yeah, I don't, all I know is that was David Yamamoto, who had been serving in that capacity for quite a while, but with his resignation from the Tillamook Board of Commissioners, that frees up that spot. Yeah.
Okay.
He was an early and loud proponent of broadband expansion.
I guess the question is that worth one of our times, or is this kind of a large group that you might not have too much effect on?
I think that he had quite a bit of effect just in terms of ensuring county perspective, and that decision-making was shared between the counties and the state in terms of how broadband investments are going to be made. So with Rachel Maddox Hughes also very involved in all of those discussions. I don't know that adding Commissioner Boyce from our jurisdiction would be helpful, but it might be a good question for Rachel. She might have more insight on that.
I think you have to apply by May 4th or early May.
Is it a gubernatorial appointment?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes it's an AOC appointment. Sometimes it's,
No,
this is a statewide.
AOC notice of
of a state appointment.
That's what I have.
Okay.
And that was just last week.
I know it's been busy. Well, I also attended the Prax open house. It was lovely. And the theater is beautiful, and it was going to present lots of options for new kinds of community participation in campus events and hosting various national and international groups. What I appreciate most about the way that developed it is that they are very focused on the intersection of arts and with science and technology. So an awful lot of the performance that they're emphasizing is going to be looking at that integration, that cross section. So that's fun. They also put a big emphasis in the near term on highlighting Native American traditions in art and music, and how that's interfacing with modern composing, etc. So they're doing a lot of highlighting of diverse communities of practice and art. That's fun. Last week, our Mental Health Addictions Developmental Diversity and Advisory Committee had held their first in-person advisory committee meeting since COVID. It was held here in the meeting room. People really appreciated being able to get together in person. It was hybrid, so we did have people attending virtually as well. Commissioner Wise also sat in on that meeting. We hosted, I should say, the advisory group hosted a couple of folks from Moms Demand Action that are focused on not gun control per se, but on extreme risk protection order implementation. There are not all states have red flag or extreme risk protection order statutes that allow law enforcement to take guns away from folks that are at risk of harming themselves or others, but Oregon does. We were one of the early states to adopt it. And ours is a little broader than some in terms of the scope. And what the folks from Moms Demand Action were doing was presenting a very broad, general educational presentation about these extreme risk protection orders, or ERPO statutes. And then they did present some more localized information about Oregon, but they didn't know very much about what was being done to implement it in our own backyard here in Benton County. So we had invited the sheriff and the deputy DA, Ryan Jocelyn, and he also brought Amy Matesto, the chief deputy, with him so that they could also provide participate in this discussion. Because the other thing that the community group wanted to know was, what are the bottlenecks? How widely is this opportunity for both being promoted? Are people even aware of it? How often have the law enforcement agencies used it? So the discussion was robust, and I think it resulted in quite a bit of new opportunities for that group to promote the statute, the local authority to other communities here around the county. I also participated in the Willamette Criminal Justice Council's sequential intercept mapping workshop on the 20th of March, which was hosted over at Oregon State University. That was a very well-attended workshop. There were somewhere between 45 and 50 people there representing all of the different aspects of the justice continuum, from first encounter and kind of prevention mode all the way through the reentry into community for someone that becomes justice involved. And that mapping exercise is focused specifically on that intersection of the legal system with folks with either addictions or mental health issues, diagnoses. And it was very, very timely from the standpoint of the Measure 110 reforms. So that workshop collected information about how our system works. That mapping will come back to us as a draft document at the Willamette Criminal Justice Council Executive Committee. And we'll have an opportunity to have some give and take, and then we'll share it with the full committee. And I'd like to see that brought to the Board of Commissioners too, and it will help inform our Measure 110 deflection work, because it is basically the context and the environment in which we're operating. The end of the day, what the group did was put forth perceived gaps in the system. And that came from all of the different participants around the large table. And then those were ranked by a dot exercise. So there were 5 top priorities. And then we broke up into kind of self-selected working groups, and each working group put together a little bit of an action plan to address those gaps. So that will also be part of the draft SIM mapping report. And again, I'd like to bring that back to the Board of Commissioners and to maybe at the same goal setting when we discuss the Measure 110 deflection, because it's a good context for the work that we're doing to create a deflection program for folks that have addiction issues away from the legal system. Related to that, the sheriff and I both met with Mike Jackson from the National Institute of Corrections based in Washington, D.C. And we did not, in this last piece of work on justice system improvement, take advantage of National Institute of Corrections resources, but they have a 4 training series for how to take a new jail, put a new jail into implementation from conceptualization all the way through to planning, the staffing and the actual operations of a new correctional facility. And that's all free. And we can embark upon that anytime. We engage them by putting in a request for technical assistance that will come from the sheriff and over his signature. So we need to, and again, this is another topic for probably that same goal-setting meeting, a robust discussion about when we want to start engaging in that series from the standpoint, because of the fact that some of those trainings, we can actually engage community members as well in that process, so that they're also educated about how to move forward. From my perspective, there's an issue of timing. When are we right? Because if we engage community members, and then those people become less interested and are not engaged by the time we go out for another bond measure, whatever, it won't be useful anymore. Although we will have built a case for and a very good record of information. One of the things that both the sheriff and I were impressed by was the fact that Mike Jackson at the National Institute of Corrections comes from the corrections world. He's been engaged with jail construction projects all around the country, small counties, big counties, cities. And he has seen all kinds of challenges to this process. He knows the kind of information that communities need and want. And I think that it would really behoove us to take advantage of those resources. And they're free. Yes, they even pay for travel. They it's pretty amazing. So I look forward to taking that conversation down the road further with the full board.
That sounds great. Thank you for sharing that. If I was a community member sitting here right now feeling a little salty, I might say, why didn't the county look at this years ago?
It's just what it came up, right?
No, we did, when I first was in office, someone mentioned the National Institute for Corrections Resources. And at the time, Sheriff Jackson had, and Diana
Simpson.
Not Diana Simpson,
Different thing.
the other Diana. The Diana that was the jail commander at the time. Blanking on her last name. She and Sheriff Jackson, I think, had both participated in the workshop that's held in Colorado, the how to build a new correctional facility. It's a multi-day workshop. Now they, instead of having folks from all over the country go to Colorado for a workshop, what they do is they bring the workshop to the jurisdiction. So they would now come here to Benton County, and all 20 seats in that workshop would be available to our people, and including community members. So it's actually, instead of having 2 experts that know the answers, you have much broader, greater breadth and depth. And can focus much more specifically on your own issues and jurisdiction and context. So the training programs have been tweaked a little bit. I think they're more beneficial now than they would have been then. But back then, people felt like they'd already been there, done that. And then those folks retired and we didn't have that expertise anymore. So it's a combination of things that led to that outcome. And then we also decided to do the criminal justice systems assessment and hire expertise instead. And I can second guess all I want. I probably do things differently if I were to do it again. I know I would. Yeah.
Rubego. Okay. There's a comment in the chat, so.
Diana Rubego, yeah.
Okay.
That's the sheriff online.
No, I think that's Katie Cooper, maybe. Yeah.
Thank you, Katie. Yeah, and so. Yeah, I think that I would be thrilled if the county took advantage of these resources. I may not be here, but I think it would be great. I also, I've been continuing to attend the Community Health Centers Board of Directors meetings. The meatiest part of that last meeting was the budget reshoot, and we all heard that presentation from Rick and team, so won't go into that. I've been also attending the local government advisory committee meetings, which are Oregon Health Authority and Oregon Department of Health and Human Services based. That's focused primarily on public health, housing, behavioral health contracts, all of those things. Oh, I wasn't asked by AOC if I would participate in a short-term, next 6 to 8 months working group on behalf of our behavioral health programs to look at streamlining behavioral health funding. So I said I would be willing to do that. So I will stay in touch with both Rick and with Damien as that work moves forward so that I can make sure that I'm representing us well. Let's see, I wanted to mention one constituent contact I've had, and then but I also want to note that I'm going to be out of the office on April 19th and 22nd. And I will be also attending the House Before 123 Summit on the 15th of April. The constituent issue is the one related to the clashing priorities of childcare facilities and our land use and code issues. The early learning hub and the folks that are focused on accelerating the availability of childcare and hit a barrier in terms of our own environmental health and code issues. I just wanted to acknowledge that, you know, it's another example like working on sustainability issues where we have multiple priorities and clashing ability to actually address them all. But I don't know whether you've also heard from either the small childcare, it's not actually small, it's a pretty good sized childcare business and or from
To the Little Beavers.
Yeah.
situation. Yeah. Well, and some of these issues are not just like, oh, it's not just bureaucracy. Sometimes people, but like literal issue, the like septic, right? Like a septic tank can only handle so many people.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's
You do.
environmental health, and I don't think the septic tank is the biggest issue. I think that there's a workaround there. It's the road. It's ODOT actually. So it's not even
Okay.
county at that point. It's yeah. So but I wanted to highlight it just because we may hear more about it. There may be more of a public light shown on it. And it's also not the last time we'll face it. There's at least one other employer in the area that is thinking about instituting on-site childcare, and they will likely face some of the same issues. So we have to be thinking about how we want to address these and be as collaborative as we can to try and work with them. I think some of the issue here is also that it takes resources up front for a business like Little Beavers to invest in these things, and without the revenue stream from the new spaces, they can't even begin to do the work. So is there a way for us to help out, you know, there with a grant or a payment plan, or, you know, I'm just wondering about creativity in order to be able to address those issues. But I just wanted to let you know that I've been engaged on that.
I don't think I got that contact or email.
No, it was a phone call
Oh,
from Brian Steinhauser with the early learning hub group that's focused on child care expansion.
I just get on my soapbox for a minute and say, in a perfect world, I would love for Benton County to be able to, you know, have some kind of childcare provided for our employees, but you know, we've got a lot going on right now, so.
Yeah. I also wanted to acknowledge that there's been leadership change at the Casa Latinos Unidos, the executive director, and that we have an ARPA grant with them. We were expecting a presentation from them, but that's not going to happen on their micro enterprise beta. And it also affects the Stand By Me program run by Council of Governments, because Casa Latinos Unidos has been a major partner for them as well. So there's some uncertainty, unfortunately, in some of our work.
Was that like Ricardo?
Yeah, Ricardo
left?
Contreras.
Okay. Is there a new person yet or? No, okay.
It was a sudden change. Lastly, there was, Mariah just pointed out that for our April 18th justice meetings with juvenile department, sheriff's office and district attorney's office, the DA is not available that day. And so wanted to know whether we've already rescheduled this meeting once. And we think dropped the last quarterly meeting. So do we want to just proceed with the other two departments at this time and reschedule the district attorney's office? Or
Yeah, that's my preference, is to just keep the meeting and it'll just be a little bit shorter without the DA. And I can still make it to the Philomath Chamber luncheon.
that sounds like a plan.
Sound good to you, Pat?
So, sounds fine. You know, things like this, like, leave it up to staff to, well, kind of rescheduling, but since we've already done that, let's have a meeting now.
Yep. Okay, I think Mariah is online. She probably heard that, but I will make sure that I circle back just to make sure. Okay, that's it from me. So.
I had a couple things to add. I was made aware of OSU and partners getting so intermediate grant on fluidics, microfluidics, and I'm not quite sure why not better conversations outside of a kind of a small group. I talked briefly with Ed Fesser from OSU that was at the Berkeley meeting and said, we need to talk. That just something that can have large implications. Oh, this is great and big deal. And I've seen thousands of jobs potentially. Oh, good. It's nice that we have all this housing available in Corvallis for. And I've talked to Rachel about it, but the group got serious funding. So it was competitive, 100 across the country, and now it's under 20 sites.
These are the,
something like that.
tech centers, the tech hubs. There are two at OSU. The other one is the cross laminated timber, the mass timber.
That was briefly mentioned, Senator Berkeley mentioned, and just well, why haven't we, where's the local discussion, just informational? We don't have to necessarily do anything, but housing and transportation, what if you are successful, what does it mean for this area?
I think the research component is not necessarily going to draw that many people, but what will is that partnership with HP, and a lot of it depends on HP. And they, I know, have also been applying for the CHIPS Act dollars. And if they expand significantly, that's what will really be the driver for those jobs. And I would love to get back to direct conversations with our HP colleagues. We had opened a channel there that
we had scheduled. We had that.
You blew me off twice, Pat.
Yeah.
I've gone to HP twice and they have, his scheduler has sat in the rain.
But just, we should be part of the.
Absolutely.
At least informational.
Yeah.
This is happening and we're.
And they did get just peanuts on the CHIPS Act.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, you actually went there because you had an appointment
Twice
and then.
with their government relations person and relations.
Oh, but it wasn't their, okay. I think you need to talk to someone else.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, and.
It's the person who presents to you guys. I mean,
But
it's.
that was not, because he wasn't, government relations, chief of operations. And, I'm just blanking on his name again.
That was here sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah, we said that we used to. The same person who presented to you.
Oh. Oh, okay. So there's been some change. That would explain part of it. Yes, but even just not having those connections as we used to, the other connection that I am missing is the fact that with Steve Clark's departure, we don't have that same regularity of contact with Oregon State University with their government relations either. And so I do think that we need to strengthen those ties. I've been able to pick up the phone to President Morty when I've needed to. But it's not the same as sometimes having that those other contacts. Paul Odenthal's also been a very good contact for us.
Well, I think it was in Paul.
Yeah.
Oregon State.
Yeah. And he may be the best contact at this point.
Yeah.
I think that we need to stay engaged with those discussions. HP has been involved. Rick, I'm looking at you with the housing discussions that have been going on, correct?
Darren is our representative on the
Right.
employee housing piece.
Okay.
They have the Oregon State leads those meetings.
Yeah.
So we're not the organizer of.
No,
those.
that's Paul Odenthal.
Right, if Paul is, and then it's like Boys and Girls Club, which is a little, just smaller employer.
Yes.
But the hospital, which is kind of going ahead and building their own employee
Mhm.
housing. And HP is supposed to be at the table and the county. And Darren is in the city, and Darren is our representative.
And those conversations are ongoing. We need to make sure that HP remains engaged there too. So.
I'll just add at a higher level, the microfluidics topic, something we talk about at almost every CWED meeting, the Cascade West Economic Development District meetings, and I'm on the executive committee. And I'm pretty sure we've approved letters or
Of support,
of some
yeah.
such in the past for that. So
Yeah. Yeah, so we just need to keep our antennae up about all that's going on there. The other, you probably also received it. There was I got an email across my desk yesterday that this week is AI week at Oregon State University, and they're having a whole series of seminars, webinars, panels focused on artificial intelligence. NVIDIA, started in our backyard. So they also have the CEO of NVIDIA that is going to be speaking on Friday. So that's might be of interest
And
as
we're
well.
sending some of our IT team to
Good.
it for some training, so.
Good.
Continuing in education on it, because it's being discussed at the NACO conferences and as
Yeah.
well as the ICMA about how we're gonna be using AI in our services. It's here.
It's one huge umbrella for,
So many
what
different
can be so many different things, exactly. Yeah.
My last thing, I've had a couple conversations with Representative Rayfield. I think it would, for several reasons, be a good move on our part to name a building or recognize his considerable efforts on behalf of the county. One obvious one is we don't have a name for it, so 4185, the blue roof building that will be in operation fairly soon. First time I talked to him, he said, well, I'll check with Amanda, make sure that's okay. Just recently got fact that he would be honored to have something like that done on his behalf.
I definitely think it's a good idea to recognize him and honor him in some fashion. I'm not sure that naming a building after him is the best way. I would definitely, a plaque. I would, a plaque in the building, like maybe as you come in the front door. I mean, don't we usually name things after people who've already passed away just to make sure that nothing
We can do
unsavory happens,
we can do whatever we want. It's our building.
Okay.
We do have a naming policy, but yes. Mhm.
Yeah.
I know that when it comes to geographic names, both at the state level and at the federal level, they've decided that they will not name geographic places after people any longer because of what you bring up. Perceptions of people change over time,
Yeah.
but we don't have that in our local naming policy.
I mean, just my preference at this point would be something smaller than a building name. It's just-
The campgrounds. Maybe.
I mean, I'm thinking more like a plaque. That's my comfort level.
It's hard because he's been so instrumental with the crisis center and some of our other structures. Yeah. He's been the bricks and mortar.
Yes, he definitely has, and I appreciate all of that. This is, he has done a very good job doing his job. Yeah, I don't know if you want to chime in with your feelings.
We do have a lot of buildings and naming opportunities coming up. And I'm certainly not averse to discussing it further. I think that some of it has been the right place, right time, right connections, everything else, but Rep. Rayfield has definitely been an incredible supporter of county. And so I'm happy to acknowledge him.
Sure, I mean, like a room, conference rooms, that kind of thing. I just hesitate to name buildings after people, I guess. That's, yeah.
Yeah, I understand. And
it's not, it's not because of anything. If I was gonna name a building after somebody, Rayfield would definitely be, at the top of the list, but yeah.
To be continued, but I think it would be a good time to recognize that he is done great things for Benton County. I mean, he had the opportunity and he delivered
Sure.
repeatedly.
Yeah, thanks for thinking about that.
Speaking of plaques, had a conversation with John Harrelson a month or two ago, and it must have been touring the courthouse, and on the right side of the front entrance, there's a little cul-de-sac that has a Diana Simpson plaque, and I want a plaque. That's an easy one. And to me, that seems like,
I've mentioned it to the other commissioners in our one-on-ones
Okay.
and it shouldn't be an issue. I think it's a fall project. I also spoke to Chris Westfall as well. And he doesn't seem opposed to it as well. I mean, it's something we can definitely look at in the fall, don't you think?
Yeah, I'm supportive of that.
and to me, it's, we can do better than that. I mean, we can do that. I didn't know that little space existed, so it's not like it gets a lot of traffic or notice. But that was his request.
It's not part of the landmarking as well, because the national landmark is the courthouse, not the land.
Well, do we check on that? Because for HRC, so sometimes the landscaping is, there's
The
like,
landscaping is for the
Yeah.
courthouse.
Is it?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's the park,
You
yeah.
have to run through.
but I don't think that'd be an issue to add plaque. I'm not on the HRC, but I was their liaison for a couple years.
And I've seen the other regularly because I would bicycle for access to the courthouse and go downtown and
Yeah.
right by the bike racks. But yeah,
Exactly.
Anyway, that was his request.
Yeah.
You haven't forgotten it, definitely.
No, that's great. He's our first Latinx district attorney, longest serving, all very good things.
yeah, first Latino district attorney in the state, so
Yes.
not just been.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know whether the historic courthouse is a better place to make that acknowledgement or the new courthouse.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I'm just relaying his
Since he said it was
request.
right there and he
Yeah.
showed you exactly where it was. He has mentioned it to me as well, so
Okay.
he has this vision of, yes.
Well, and I think we could do that and something else at the new courthouse. That seemed like a fairly small ask.
Well, I think we could add to the agenda item this afternoon, we could talk about maybe goal setting, going through once again, how we name things, kind of go through the process. Maybe look at an inventory of some of the many opportunities that are going to be coming up in naming things in the next possible year and how we may be able to roll it all up.
yeah, between all the buildings and meeting rooms and yeah. Yep. Yeah, if we were a foundation or a nonprofit, we would be putting all of that together and soliciting money for all the naming rights. Since we're not, we still have to think about how we want to name things.
And we need more names.
Yep.
Turn down the other.
Anything else for the good of the order?
No, I think this is a good conversation and I think I like this about our goal setting meetings. That's
Yes.
helpful to have this time. Thank you.
It is helpful to have this kind of time, I agree. And what looked like an hour-long meeting on the agenda turned into a 3+ hour meeting.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you very much. We are adjourned. Yeah.
You break the news.
No.